Thank you for joining us in person and online. It's a pleasure to be back at Towson University. Thank you, President Ginsburg, for your hospitality last night. TU always brings such a fantastic energy and warmth. And a special thanks to last night's student violinist, Lythan Campbell, for her lovely performance. It's always a treat to see our students' talent shine. I'd like to start the meeting by welcoming Dr. Darlene Brannigan-Smith to her first board meeting as Frostburg's interim president. Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith assumed her role last month on March 10th. As Chancellor Perman has said, Dr. Smith's experience and professional expertise in business, finance, and marketing gives Frostburg an advantage. We are grateful for your service. I want to also welcome Towson University student, Rain Riviere Forbes. Rain, where are you out there? I don't see her, but if you're out there, stand or raise your hand.
She's my classmate.
Okay. Who was appointed by Governor Moore as the next student regent. Although her appointment officially begins on July 1st, it was nice of her to attend our dinner last night since we're on her home turf. Miss Riviere Forbes is from Prince George's County. She is not new, though, to the board experience. Although she's a freshman, she previously served as Prince George County Public School Board of Education student member. She is a law and American civilization major who is active in the ROTC and aspires to attend law school. Welcome, Ms. Riviere Forbes. Chancellor Perman and I had the honor and the privilege of presenting the Board of Regents Faculty Awards. USM faculty across 8 universities were recognized for distinguished performance in 5 categories: teaching, scholarship and research, creative activity, public service, and mentoring. It was such a pleasure to honor these members who represent the best of our exceptional faculty. While you may have seen them this morning or in the slideshow at the start of the meeting, I want to ask the recipients who have joined us this morning to please stand for one last round of applause. Well, it's the last one for this meeting because based on their accomplishments, they will have a lot more applause. The USM was also well represented in the Daily Record's 2025 Top 100 Women in Maryland. Among those recognized is SU President Dr. Carolyn Ringer-Lepre, who is not able to be with us today. Before I lay out the agenda, I want to switch gears for a moment to discuss how we might pivot to meet our current challenges. We've done this before, of course. When the pandemic caused our enrollment to drop, the board monitored enrollment more intently and took action to allow the system to respond. We're now back to pre-pandemic enrollment numbers, and we're stronger for it. But once again, we're facing several external factors beyond our immediate control of our universities that could affect our enrollment and operational costs. Some of these factors include the decline in international student enrollment, delays or reductions in federal student aid, job losses as a result of federal workforce reductions and economic turmoil, additional budget cuts and revenue reduction at the state and federal level. Later in the meeting, Chancellor Perman will outline the state's response to federal actions, and Senior Vice Chancellor Herbst will share where we are from a budgetary standpoint. As a board, we must once again lean in and, as appropriate, help our students, faculty, staff, and universities weather these challenges. I've asked Regent Fish, who leads the board's enrollment workshop, to shift its focus toward developing strategies and supporting policies that address these potential impacts. Thank you, Regent Fish. Now, moving to the agenda, we will have a public comment in a moment. Next, we'll have our host, President Mark Ginsburg, who will give the welcome remarks and share some of the exciting happenings at Towson University. Then we will move on to the educational forum. Today's educational forum will be presented by Dr. Jennifer Lynch, Associate Vice Chancellor for Education and Engagement. She will present on civic education and the work of USM's Community Engagement Council. Then Chancellor Perman will deliver his report to the board, followed by the report of the councils. Ms. Wilkerson, do we have requests for public comment? Okay. Hearing none, I will turn the podium over to President Ginsburg.
Thank you, Chair Gooden. Thank you, Chair Gooden, and good morning. Let me begin by saying it's the greatest honor of my career, the greatest honor of my life to serve as the 15th president of this great university, of Towson University. Just a moment ago, we saw the award winners this morning. I want to again congratulate them because it's a great honor for us to host not just this meeting, but to host the award ceremony for terrific faculty members across the system. My only regret this morning is that the sun's not shining because this is a beautiful campus, but it's even more beautiful when you can see the sunshine on our magnificent properties and buildings and facilities. So I hope you'll come back when the sun's shining, but still enjoy the great ambience of our campus this morning. I think I have a clicker here. Very good. But let me begin by saying during this moment in time, as Chair Gooden mentioned, where there are challenges in our context and environment, where there's turbulence in the air and some even question the value of higher education, at Towson University, we intend to remain both mission-driven and values-led. And our drive is driven by our mantra that we provide leadership for the public good, that our strategic plan and its 6 embedded pillars drive the work that we do, inspires our students to learn and develop, and creates an environment here at Towson University that's both generative and inspiring. The 6 pillars to educate and innovate, to engage and include, and to support and to sustain are all fundamental to the identity of this great university. And so during this time of ambiguity, during this time when there are questions, we're going to remain true to who we are. And I hope that this is an inspiration for us all. Because at Towson, there's a tradition of impact and a tradition of excellence. We believe that it's a university that's first for Maryland. I said last night, and I truly believe that there are many, many great universities in Maryland. There are many great universities in the university system of Maryland. But together, we're universities are not just great in the state, together we're universities that are great for our state. At Towson, during this time when there have been budget challenges that we're all facing, we're all tightening our belts just a bit, that we will create financial sustainability here, even in the context of some financial uncertainty. Because Towson's an engine for our community, an engine of access for our nearly 20,000 students, an engine of opportunity for our students to learn, grow, develop, and create a pathway for life success, an engine of innovation to solve and address some of the most vexing and challenging problems of our time, and an engine of workforce and economic development for our community. There are 3 ideals that we believe are fundamental to the identity of what TU is. One is that we're a caring community. And I define caring in a particular way. When I was an undergraduate, I had the fortune of having a professor named Milton Mayeroff, who wrote a great book called On Caring. And Mayeroff defined caring in a particular way. He defined caring as helping others to grow. This is a university that's a caring community because fundamentally, we help others to grow. We promote the success of every tiger. And of course, we strengthen our state. We do that through our engagement with the community, not just the learning and the development and the growth of our students, but through the engagement in our community. In the traditional spires of excellence that our university has had in P-12 education, having historically one of the largest and most respected colleges of education, not just in the state, but in the country, and continuing to have the largest college of education in Maryland. We train more healthcare professionals at the undergraduate level than any university in the state. And we're very proud not just of what we do, but where we do it. Some of you have seen our new facility for the College of Health Professions. Our College of Business, one of the largest colleges here on our campus, is doing a magnificent job training the next leaders of industry, the next leaders in the managerial space, the next leaders in all fields related to business. Our cybersecurity program, nationally known, doing a fantastic job of filling gaps in our state in one of the highest need fields. And of course, the field of criminal justice, where we have great needs in our state for police officers and others in the security professions, being a landmark program. But that's not all. The community engagement we do is also driven by the structures and the places, the settings at our university that are engaged deeply and fundamentally with our community. Our startup and our accelerator, I spoke about at the retreat last fall at the Armory. The Dr. Nancy Grasmick Leadership Institute, that's providing training and consultative assistance to public and private and nonprofit organizations all over Maryland. Our athletic and our arts programs that are the front porches of our university. Tiger Athletics achieving new heights this year with our athletes, not just achieving on the field and on the court and in the gyms, but achieving in the classroom, having record number of our students on the dean's list and having record number of our student athletes achieving a 4.0 grade point average. During this time of turbulence in college athletics, I'm proud to say that our students who are athletes are first and foremost students. And of course, the arts at TU. We celebrated today Dr. Luis Angelka, the trumpet mastermind, who's just one of many musicians, and hearing Blythe McCannon last night. The university is growing, nearly 20,000 students. 60% of our students identify as members of a minoritized racial or ethnic group. 90% of our students hail from our state. 17% are first generation. 38% receive Pell Grants, and 57% receive some form of financial aid, almost all federal financial aid. Our university students are representative of the students of Maryland, and they're achieving at high levels. We've had 3 straight years of enrollment records in terms of first-year applications. This year, seeing an application surge of almost 6% beyond last year being a record year. Our graduate enrollment has increased this year 4%, and this year we have the most doctoral students in the university's history. On the right, I won't go through it, but it's really interesting to me to see the most popular majors at our university. So we're training students in some of the most important fields, not just today, but for tomorrow. Almost 200,000 alumni, almost 120,000 residing here in Maryland, almost 36,000 here in Baltimore County. But fundamentally, I want to emphasize that 88% of our recent graduates are employed in our region. 88% of our students. It amplifies that we are an engine of workforce and economic development for our state. Here's our future. Over the last year, I've had the opportunity to engage in what I called a listening tour. Over 2,000 members of our community participated in nearly 60 sessions. And through that, we've identified a series of priorities to lift, leverage, further contemporize, and further engage the 6 pillars of our strategic plan. And these are the areas that we will focus on over the next couple of years to try to make a great university even greater. And with that, let me pause and take just a moment again to thank all of you on the Board of Regents for the opportunities to serve, to thank my colleagues for the great amount of colleagueship and friendship that we have and for the work that we do together. And with that, let me just roll a very short video to tell the story of Towson University. Thank you all very much. Good morning. Welcome to TU. I'm so glad you're here. It's great to have you on our campus.
Is a place where success is possible and within reach for everyone. TU's position as a top public university nationwide is a testament to the transformative impact we provide our community every day. Diversity and inclusion are at the heart of TU's mission. We know that when voices of every background, culture, and identity are valued, true innovation thrives. Here, ambition needs guidance, curiosity ignites discovery, and talent turns into achievement. TU is a catalyst for workforce development in the region, serving as the largest producer of teachers and undergraduate healthcare workers in the state. We are also a national leader in cybersecurity and computer science education, and a hub for entrepreneurship that transforms imagination into reality. TU's impact extends beyond world-class education through a robust community programming, including performances, workshops, and access to 19 Division I athletic programs. Every goal achieved is a door opened to new possibilities, to brighter futures, and to lives forever changed. Welcome to Towson University, where opportunity, impact, and excellence fuel Maryland's future.
As some of you know, I recently had the privilege of serving as one of the 3 co-leaders of the Council of Higher Education as a strategic asset. The group of leaders from business, government, nonprofits, and academia has released the report, America's Talent Moonshot: How the United States Can Win the Global Competition for Prosperity and Security. Along with the call to expand educational opportunities, workforce pipelines, and research activities, the research also laid out a vision for renewing higher education's civic mission and its commitment to sustaining democracy. Given everything we're seeing nationally and globally, the need to recommit ourselves to civic education and civic engagement has never been clearer. Our graduates must be responsible and engaged citizens who understand how democracy works, how it can be threatened, and how every citizen plays a part in strengthening and preserving it. We have made civic education and engagement part of the USM mission and strategic plan. And today's education forum will bring us up to speed on our system-wide efforts and initiatives. Dr. Jennifer Lynch, USM's Associate Vice Chancellor for Education and Engagement, will lead the discussion. Dr. Lynch has an extensive professional background in education policy and workforce development, and she is a 2-time alumna of Towson University. So today's meeting is a bit of a homecoming for her. Dr. Lynch, welcome home. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. It is my honor to be here, and as a psychology major, both undergraduate and graduate, leading the way to continue to serve in Maryland. So thank you so much, President Ginsburg. Good morning, and thank you, Chair Gooden, Vice Chair Ganella, Chancellor Perman, Regents, presidents, and distinguished guests. It is a pleasure to stand before you today to discuss the incredible work happening in our institutions that support the civic fabric of not only our system, but of Maryland. And there is no better place to start this discussion than by anchoring our conversation in our shared commitment to civics for the good of Maryland. Civics is about more than just acquiring knowledge about government. It is about developing informed community members who actively participate in our democracy and in making our world a better place. Higher education plays a crucial role in developing the thinking, beliefs, and actions that will serve our students and their communities throughout their life. And the USM has been a leader in this work by increasing the number of student voters, training over 2,000 student election officials and judges, and graduating over 40,000 students a year who will contribute to their personal, local, national, and global communities. And because we are focused on serving the good of Maryland, I would like to take a few minutes to just highlight how our work contributes to the civic fabric of Maryland. But first, I want to take a moment of personal privilege to just thank Regent Merrick, because in one of our previous conversations, he challenged me. He said, how many of our local elected officials attended the USM institution in the community in which they serve? And that conversation sparked some ideas and some additional research. So with that, I am proud to say that 79% of education degrees in Maryland are conferred by a USM institution. Over 50% of Maryland doctors attended a USM school. 73% of Maryland's judges, 46% of our legislators, and 56% of our county executives all attended a USM school. And it is a common misperception that our legislators, county executives, and judges all have political science or law degrees, when in fact, our leaders, just like our full student body, have varied interests and come from diverse backgrounds and degree pathways. In fact, only 22 members of the Maryland General Assembly and 6 of our county executives have undergraduate poli-sci degrees. In fact, there are 111 different undergraduate degrees represented in our General Assembly. The Regents, in their wisdom, understood the value of this diversity, which is why our Vision 2030 strategic plan calls for civic education to be embedded throughout the curriculum, understanding that just one course or one focus on a few select degrees would be inadequate in ensuring that every USM student gains the knowledge and skills needed to be our next generation of community leaders. And we know that community leadership is not just about elected officials. Civic participation and civic leadership comes in all shapes and sizes. And we asked our students and our student council representatives to weigh in on what that means to them. What does civics mean? And their responses had very clear themes. Civics isn't singularly about holding a position of power or understanding the Constitution or the federal branches of government. To our students, civic engagement is the process by which every individual is invited to imagine and co-construct the community around them. Civic education is community engagement. It is about understanding how they can make a difference in the world around them at both the personal and hyperlocal level, as well as at the county and state level. It is about understanding how their degrees and professional choices intersect with the world around them. And perhaps most importantly, our students want us to understand that all students are unique. Not all students want to be activists who march or make signs or have their civic identity tied to a political party. They want us to understand that civics is more than voting. Our international and undocumented students may not be able to vote in our federal elections, but our students want us to know they are vital to our civic fabric. And when we asked, what does civics look like on your campus? The students provided an incredibly rich view. And I've given you only a few examples here because I could not fit it on this slide or dozens of slides. There's so much that is happening on our campuses. From student groups who cultivate a sense of community, encourage voting or bring in speakers, to campus-sponsored seminars or tax assistance. From resident life and campus gatherings to community art and media opportunities, our students consistently referred to the importance of being an active and valued agent within their community. They also spoke of the need to build specific step-by-step knowledge on how they can enact change. Our students spoke of institutional supports like writing centers that help students prepare written testimony for bill hearings, or engagement in community projects to clean up the bay or provide local tutoring. And they spoke of the value of being engaged with campus-level civic processes like our shared governance. Our students reflect the work that is happening all across our campuses as a result of the long-standing commitment of our regents and the daily work of our presidents and their campus leadership teams. And while we know that civics has always been an integral part of the USM vision and mission, our focused work began in 2018 with the Regents Civic Task Force on Civic Education and Community Engagement. Since that time, we have participated in system-wide workshops, hosted a civic engagement summit, launched the Civic Education and Community Engagement Council, and supported our institutions in applying for the Carnegie classification for community engagement. And we are proud to announce that 8 of our universities will be ready to submit their application at the end of April. The charge of Civic Education and Community Engagement Council includes the fostering an ethos of civic engagement, identifying and encouraging cross-institutional collaboration, supporting institutions in seeking Carnegie classification, and developing campus-level implementation plans. And although the Campus Council has only been operational for just over a year, we have already accomplished 3 of our 5 goals. We are in progress for 1, and we look forward to helping support campus implementation plans in the next year. In the past year, our CC Council has been busy. We facilitated a constructive dialogue webinar. We engaged with the State Board of Elections, the Maryland 250 Commission, and relevant state government agencies. We've offered intensive support to our institutions who are applying for Carnegie classification, and we developed system-wide communities of practice and affinity groups. The work and the progress that we have made would not be possible without the generous investment of our regents. In 2023, we received a $300,000 investment to provide institutional support for the curricular integration of civic learning, for data collection, and for Carnegie application completion. This investment afforded us the leverage needed to secure additional grant funds, and it is with those additional funds that we were able to train over 2,000 student election officials. And to learn a little bit more about how this investment has supported practices at the campus level, I would like to introduce Dr. Sandy Pope and Nicole Morano, our co-chairs of the CC Council. First, Dr. Pope. A classroom teacher for 9 years, Dr. Sandy Pope completed his PhD research on civic education and community engagement at Teachers College, Columbia University. He joined Salisbury University in 2013 and is now an associate professor of education, where he teaches about social studies and civic education, and where he studies interactions between classroom instruction and community engagement. He also serves as director of the Institute for Public Affairs and Civic Engagement, where he leads a dozen programs, including the largest AmeriCorps program in Maryland and the largest nonprofit Leadership Alliance campus program in the United States. Within USM, he has earned a 2018 Wilson H. Elkins Endowed Professorship. In 2023, the Salisbury University Distinguished Faculty Award, and in 2024, the Board of Regents Award for Public Service. Outside of our system, Dr. Pope's recognitions include the 2022 Barbara Bush Award for Faculty Leadership and Civic Engagement, and the 2023 We the People Award for Excellence and Innovation from the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. Dr. Pope.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for your interest in and support of Maryland higher education generally, and civic education specifically. One of the charges given to CECE, as you saw, was to identify civic literacy as an expectation for all students. We feel confident that this goal is achievable and should be pursued. We feel that every campus and even most degree programs are and have been working towards this goal, and that many are already successful. I'll use the next 4 minutes and 40 seconds to summarize one part of the 9-year process that established civic literacy as an expectation for all students at Salisbury University. Though instructive, it is, of course, just one example. I joined SU ready to continue my teaching and research interests around civic education and community engagement. During my second year, Dean Martin Paraboom named me co-director of PACE, offering me a space where I could do that work and help other faculty do the same. With my co-director, Sarah Surak, I developed Civic Engagement Across the Curriculum, or CEAC, an 8-week seminar for faculty from every academic school on campus. Within 4 years, more than 10% of our full-time tenure-track faculty had completed the program. They received $500 stipends for completing the seminar and submitting revised courses. Dr. Surak and I received $1,000 and a unique data set. In publications like Educating the Educators, we shared how-to program evaluations, describing how faculty participants read about and discussed justice-oriented citizenship and social responsibility, practiced facilitating difficult conversations, and revised courses to align with best practices. We found that while faculty want students to know things like how a bill becomes a law, their focus is more on students learning how and why specialists or professionals in different fields act on that knowledge. Thus, we developed new theoretical frameworks like disciplinary citizenship. This helped faculty treat citizenship as a form of literacy in which particular disciplines use particular skills, bodies of knowledge, or theories to act on civic matters. In our fourth year, we applied for and won an Elkins professorship. Thank you if you were involved in that decision. That funding helped us create an online asynchronous SEAC that is now freely available to faculty across the USM. College Park and Towson University used last year's USM grants to bring SEAC to their faculty, and I'm in talks with UMBC and Frostburg about how to set up similar efforts. I'm also continuing to work with College Park about integrating SEAC into a badging program, but frankly, we're skeptical about whether we can effectively manage the process. I'm sure that you've heard that SU launched a new general education program this fall, which includes a new student learning outcome for civic and community engagement. You can see that listed at the bottom of the slide. The work done with SEAC made including civic and community engagement perhaps the easiest step of the 9-year process. We already had a faculty development program in place that by that time had trained more than 20% of our colleagues. We had fairly good data about student learning and a strong infrastructure and pace that was respected on and off campus. In sum, we had community buy-in and the resources to support the effort. But to our credit, this SLO and the course that it follows is just one piece of the new general education program that is relevant to the question of civic education. There are also requirements for students to complete coursework in social configurations, social issues, humanity and context, and experiential learning. The programs and supports that helped us reach these goals have also earned external recognition. SU has been recognized as among the first full participation institutions for civic learning by AAC&U's CLDE initiative. Towson University is the other USM school on that list. And we've won 3 separate national awards from the American Democracy Project and helped SU earn the Carnegie Engaged Campus classification in 2020. I also feel pretty good about our reclassification application that I'll submit next week. I'd like to pause here and quote from the 2018 report of the Board of Regents Task Force on Civic Education and Engagement, which read, USM is deeply committed to preparing students for effective civic participation. However, it's clear that the collective impact will benefit from stronger collaborations across institutions, greater attention to curricular and co-curricular opportunities for civic learning, enhanced professional development for faculty, and dedicated resources to support these priorities. I know the question of resources is a difficult one, but I feel like we're making strong progress across our system. To close, I'd like to opine on the attractiveness of a focused course called Civics, which would provide a deep grounding in core democratic principles, procedures, and documents. I think that such a course exists, specifically in the Maryland high schools that graduate around 85% of USM's first-year students. University is more than high school plus, mainly because we expect our students to begin applying their knowledge and skill on a consistent basis by taking on true civic and professional roles. We ask them to discover and act on their own disciplinary citizenship. I've started talks with colleagues in high schools and at College Park about bringing SEAC to the high school level. We hope to better align the civic experiences of secondary and post-secondary schools so that they complement and build over time, culminating with the USM degree. I think that might offer the next step towards helping our students graduate as more effective and active citizens. Thank you, Dr. Lynch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pope. Now I would like to turn our attention to Nicole Morano to discuss our work in community engagement. As a co-chair of the CC Council, Ms. Morano also serves as the Vice President for Student Success and Chief Student Affairs Officer at the University of Baltimore. She oversees student success and retention efforts, mental health and wellness, disability and access services, career services, community and civic engagement, veteran services, student development, diversity and international support services, first-year programming, and academic advising initiatives at the university. Working in higher education for over 25 years, she is an advocate for students and their success, and as you can tell, very accomplished. Ms. Moran.
Good morning, And thank you for allowing me time to highlight the impactful work that's being done at the University of Baltimore as it relates to community engagement and its impact. Engagement is who we are and critical to our identity and mission. Engagement is a focus point of all of our guiding documents and has been identified as an institutional priority in our Middle States report. As our president often shares, we are the University of Baltimore for Baltimore. The three overarching themes that I will briefly cover are our anchor institution initiatives, the importance of our centers, and student success. Our anchor institution initiatives have both local and statewide impact. Our partnerships with the Baltimore City Police Academy and the City College High School will actually co-locate 3 entities on 1 campus in the fall semester. Needs were identified by both of these organizations. UBalt stepped up and provided a solution. Both organizations needed space for important training and education, and we were able to partner to provide this resource. Additionally, our Second Chance program for incarcerated students and our various law clinics address critical community issues and needs. Second, we are privileged to have many wonderful centers at UBalt. Our Schaefer Center for Public Policy oversees our Next Gen Leaders for Public Service program and our Community Development Fellowship program. Both provide our students with paid internships and real-life experiences at the state and local level. Our Rosenberg Center for Student Engagement and Inclusion partners with our students, faculty, and staff on service learning and community engagement opportunities. Recently, we held our day in Annapolis, which is a collaboration between both of these wonderful centers. This opportunity affords our students the engagement opportunity to talk and walk with elected officials in Annapolis and learn more about public service. And we appreciate the USM funding that was provided to our institution to take our students and faculty to that experience. Last but not least, our student voter and democratic engagement work continue to rank among the highest in the state, and we are very proud of that. Last, like many of our USM peers, we view engagement as a high impact practice that engages our students' lives inside and outside of the classroom. Additionally, at UBalt, we view community engagement through the lens of student success. We strongly believe that providing students with multiple engagement opportunities throughout their time with us will enhance the sense of belonging and career readiness skills, resulting in positive impacts on retention, student experience, degree completion, and job attainment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Morano. As you can see, the investment offered in 2023 has had profound impacts across our campuses. We are in the final stages of this investment, and campuses will provide their final report to us in June 2025. We will look forward to providing more detailed updates after these funds have come to a close. In the year ahead, the CC Council will support the development of campus-level implementation plans. We will identify civic education and community engagement metrics that align with our Vision 2030 strategic plan goals. And we will work with our campuses to identify opportunities and barriers to the full implementation of our Vision 2030 strategic plan. And with that, my team and I stand ready to answer any questions you may have.
Regent Breslin, I know you have the first question.
Is my mic on? Well, thank you, Madam Chair and Chancellor. You know that I've been a strong advocate of enhancing really the civics initiatives that we've got on our campuses. And I want to thank Dr. Lynch and Dr. Pope and Dr. Morano for your report. If you would indulge me, I've prepared a couple of comments. So I don't really have a question for you, but I want to support your activities. I think they're very impressive. But my question probably in the end, I'll ask it a couple of times, is it enough? Is basically what my question will be. But for the sake of the regents who are involved in September of 2023, You may recall that State Senator Jim Rosa Pepe wrote to us to share with us a copy of a New York Times article entitled, "By Abandoning Civics, Colleges Helped Create the Culture Wars." He then asked, how do we handle this at the University of Maryland? Obviously, it's a mission critical issue. My recollection is that we responded to Senator Rose Pepe with a number of emails, primarily from College Park's provost, in a response identifying initiatives that existed at that time, many like those presented today. And with the initiatives, which are very impressive, that we discussed and that you just presented today, my question, as well as that of some of my colleagues, is it enough? Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor recognized the failure in our educational institutions with respect to the lack of civics outcomes and made it a post-retirement mission until the day she died to see to the implementation of her iCivics curriculum across our society. Founded in 2009 by Justice O'Connor, iCivics is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to advancing civic learning by providing educators and students with the knowledge, skills, and resources needed to embrace and engage in our civic life together. We empower educators and lead the movement to make civic education a nationwide priority so all young people have the confidence to shape the world around them and believe in our country's future, was her quote. Prior to her passing, she said, "We must arm today's young people with innovative civic education that is relevant to them. Bringing high-quality civics to every school in every state of our union is the only way that our next generations will become effective citizens and leaders." On the iCivics website, it asks, why civics? The answer, because when young people understand their role in shaping our country, they have greater faith in it. The following are some press articles and research studies that support the need. The LA Times article from September 16th, 2024, headline reads, "Do you know the three branches of US government? Many don't, leading to a push for civics education." It's a very, very sobering read. Law and Liberty's article from September 16th, 2024, reviving the study of American government. It includes research findings that are quite frankly frightening. The American Council of Trustees and Alumni in 2016 issued a crisis in civics education, and they're going to be following up with a white paper prior to 2026, our nation's 250th anniversary, expressing the case for the critical need to address this crisis. When reading the University of Maryland's Joint Presidential and University Senate Task Force report on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia last spring, that our President Darrell Pines led throughout that pretty turbulent six to 9 months, it stated 10 recommendations for on-campus action plan, and this was the third item on the action plan. As an institution that prioritizes critical thinking, the university should seriously consider a curricular requirement related to dialogue and understanding in environments of tension, difference, and conflict. A possible avenue for implementation of this recommendation might be found in the newly developed Navigating Diverse Social Environments general education requirement for University of Maryland undergraduates, or it might be fulfilled in other ways. At minimum, this one credit course will include discussion of handling difficult conversations, mastering the principles of effective dialogue, and learning conflict resolution skills. It might also provide training on free speech, academic freedom, democracy, religious differences, and Islamophobia/anti-Semitism, especially regarding student-to-student conduct. The university should provide funding for assessment and implementation of this recommendation. I propose to you that this, as well as other basic information on why this country was founded as it was, could easily be rolled up and included in a full 3-credit civics course taught across our system's institutions. And with that, I conclude my comments, but I believe I have some colleagues who also want to speak to the issue.
Who else wants to speak to the issue? Louis?
I agree with you 100%. We have a fairly mature crowd in the room today. And most of you remember taking American history and geography, a bit on world history and a bit on world geography in elementary school, middle school, junior high school. But unfortunately, those are not always part of the curriculum today. I believe that civics education should be, and it should be mandatory. Today's students typically do not learn the basic facts of the US Constitution, specifically Articles 1, 2, and 3 that set up the framework for our entire tripartite government, not only federally, but in every state and locality across this country, executive, legislative, and judicial. Basic stuff like how laws are written, how Congress works, and how laws are debated and passed and signed or vetoed by a president or a governor. Understanding why we have a Supreme Court or an electoral college. Understanding the Bill of Rights and how they protect it and what rights are included and what rights aren't included, because most of our students, I believe, would be confused on exactly what their rights are enumerated in that document. You know, Hugh mentioned conflict resolution and how to discuss political issues in a calm and thoughtful conversation, and how to respect other individuals' point of view. It is a must. It is the proper way to conduct a life. You know, it's frequently embarrassing for parents and educators when we see young adults question and they can't answer basic questions on civics. It's like watching Jay Leno's old jaywalking segment where he asked basic questions of American students, or even recently on the news where you saw some reporter with a microphone interviewing students on the beach in Florida and asking basic questions like, who did America fight in the American Revolution? When was the Constitution written? Or looking at a world map and saying, can you point out where Korea is or where Bolivia is? Most of these students have no clue. They cannot point out countries on a map, and they do not know American history. I recently looked up the test for citizenship. And if you're an immigrant in this country and you're applying for citizenship, it's a tremendous test, and you have to study for it. And if you look at the questions on there, and I pulled it up online, there's about 150 sample questions. I don't believe that most of our graduating students in the USM could answer the majority of them. I know I struggled with some of them, but it's basic things that we require of new citizens. It should be required of our existing citizens. Since earning a bachelor's degree is probably the last formal education our students will receive, I think it's important that we send them out in the world with a basic understanding of civics. I believe this should be added to the mandatory general education requirements of all students across the entire USM. Thank you.
Okay, and Regent Wood?
Yes, thank you very much. I support Regent Wrestling's motion. I believe this course is extremely important because it will give us, the administration and faculty, the ability to impart the knowledge to our students of our history, our civic history, who will become the next leaders of our country, of the sacrifices of hard work, blood, life, and treasure our forefathers gave to make the United States of America the greatest country on earth. Our forefathers were not given freedom and the ability to participate in an open and welcoming society. They earned it, beginning when we broke away from England and began the great adventure that became America. As a governing board of 12 universities and 3 regional higher education centers, consisting in total of approximately 176,000 students, we have a duty, I believe, to provide these citizens and future leaders with the knowledge of how we obtain the rights and duties of citizenship and the privileges and obligations we have as citizens. Interestingly, there is no federal mandate for teaching civics, as the states are allowed to set their own priorities, which often don't prioritize civics. There's a proverb I think we've all familiar with, which reminds us that those who forget the mistakes of the past are bound to repeat them. In my view, I believe it would be a mistake to allow the next generation to grow up unaware of the incredible sacrifices made by our forefathers to give us the life we enjoy today. And by making civics mandatory for these students, will lessen the opportunity for that to happen. I think we have an opportunity here, a unique opportunity here to step up and make a difference in the future of America.
Regent McMillan and then Regent Fish.
I think the mic's on. Yes. First of all, I commend you on your presentation. Like Regent Breslin, I'm concerned that many kids are left behind with these initiatives. You know, I was starkly made aware of this when I was at Oxford many years ago. I had a tutorial with a Pakistani, a Japanese student, a German student, English student. And I was pretty versed in American politics. I had worked in the Senate and so forth. But every one of those students about the American government than I did, I hate to say. And when I looked at the research that ACT has done and other folks have done, there's only about 19% of the schools across the 1,000+ universities that have been surveyed that either require history or US government. And so I agree with the Regents in their comments here. You know, in my experience, I would say members of Congress have a very good understanding of our government, and we're thankful for that. But recently, a United States Senator came out and said, and our three branches of government, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, about a comment about, you know, our government. And so this is really a problem, and we need to make sure that we address it because, as has been said, our democracy is at stake. Thank you.
Regent Hassan.
I think Ellen.
Oh, Ellen and then Regent, sure.
We have new presidents and we have new board members as well. This is not a new discussion for this board. 11 years ago, there was a discussion on this topic and there was concurrence at that point in time in the value of instituting what I will call an overt civics education. And that is both K through 12 as well as higher ed. If there ever was a time to do this, now is the time to do it.
Regent Hassan.
Yeah, so my question, I know it's a great idea to have the civic education code of conduct, but I believe this should be taught in the K through 12 program, not in the college. It's too late when you get into college and university and you're trying to now teach them the civics. This is what should be done in K through 12, and we should push for that under the P20 program, whatever we had.
Other Regent? And
yeah, just briefly, maybe two thank yous to begin with. The first is I want to thank those who worked on our strategic plan because if you haven't taken a look at it, we have civic education embedded in our strategic plan, which is terrific that we've recognized the people who came before us how important this is. The second thank you is to Dr. Lynch and her team for taking a look at this question that I had raised based on some research I'm doing in my full-time job. There's so much talk out there in the world about how important elite private universities are in producing leaders. It actually turns out that public institutions like ours are the ones that are producing America's leaders, whether they're legislators, whether they're judges, as the data showed. So we need to own that and be proud of that. But then the next part, which all my colleagues have referenced, is that we have to take account of the fact that students today know way less civics than they used to. So if I'm not mistaken, the most recent NAEP, National Assessment for Educational Progress, nation's report card, they tested 8th graders in America nationwide. It's not disaggregated by state, I believe. And I think 22% of American eighth graders reach proficiency in civics. Now, I looked and they haven't tested 12th graders in about a decade, but the last time they tested 12th graders, it was about the same. We're talking about 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 American students are able to reach proficiency in these basic subjects. So whether we come at this issue saying that depending on your political bent, your ideological bent, that we need to prepare students to preserve the greatness of America, or if you say we need to prepare students to change and improve America, both of those things require that our students know a lot about our institutions so they can go about that work of preservation or change. And so my concern is if we're doing a great job of producing leaders, are we doing a great job of making sure that they have the knowledge necessary to do the things that are necessary? I mean, keep in mind that we're about to celebrate the nation's 250th anniversary. It would be great if we were confident of that. So my just general question is, rather than acting first, I'm curious, do we know what our students know about civics rather than acting first? A basic question I guess I have for Dr. Lynch or others. Have we ever surveyed? No, it could be the case that 22% of kids nationwide don't know much about this, but in Maryland, it's fantastic. So do we have the baseline of information before we act to say, this is what our students know or don't know before we take some action? I've never seen that data, but I don't know if it exists. Thank you.
Other thoughts? Yes, Yvette.
So I guess I was just listening to what Ellen said about this is not a new discussion. It happened 11 years ago. So the mandatory part obviously is going to push it beyond discussion so that it really becomes a reality. But I think that one of the things we need to think about is not only educating students, but making them take the next step and becoming civically engaged once they are out of that classroom situation. Making sure that they take it to the next step and become really practicing efficient members of their community and society, becoming voters or whatever is necessary to take ownership of their society as a result of what we're doing. So we have to make sure the dots are connected. It doesn't just stop at the classroom door.
Any region who hasn't spoken wants to speak?
I have a
Well,
follow-up.
that's a second speech for Bill. Josiah?
I would also comment and say, like, I agree with what everyone has said so far. I would think it's not only important on what's being taught, but how it's being taught. A lot of students have different ways of how they're able to intake information. So if we also prioritize the way in which we're teaching students, I think that's a very vital thing as well.
Drew?
Thanks. I do have a comment, but first I just want to follow up and see, does anybody have an answer to Regent Merrick's question?
Dr. Pope. Dr. Pope.
I'll do my best because it is a really broad question. So I don't have anything about, say, the citizenship exam itself, but there are some evidence bases that we use for this. So in preparing this year's Carnegie report, we were looking at the heightened civic competency and engagement assessment. And we found that SU students scored slightly higher than the pool average on just about every one of those, including civic competency and civic attitudes. Civic competency includes things like awareness of how bills become a law, awareness of government structures, things like that. Civic attitudes encompass things like belief and ability to affect change, confidence in knowing where to go with a question or a problem. I'll share we were below average in civic participation at the international level, although the national group for that was only 4% testing as competent at the international level. We didn't collect much money for campus issues, and surprisingly didn't do much to help protect the environment, so we're low on that. But I think what's relevant to this conversation is that we still had 19% of our students scoring below the competency level on that. So although we're above the national level, overall, there's still obviously room for growth there as well. Just another kind of anecdotal, not really an anecdotal one, but the Corporation for National and Community Service, in partnership with the census a few years ago, put out a ranking of civic engagement across the United States, and Salisbury, Maryland was ranked number 5 overall, which is great. And we love that statistic. But even in that pool, only 1/3 of respondents reported having helped a neighbor to solve a problem. So it's an interesting question of like, even if we do well in some markers, back to the kind of the original point, there is always room for improvement on that. But I am not aware of anything more specifically regarding like the detailed knowledge that we might be wondering about. So one of those questions would just be, what are the questions that we're looking for, right? What is the information that we want to see? Is it fact-based? Is it procedural? Is it attitudinal? And kind of helping to identify that question in more detail, perhaps.
I would also want to answer Regent Hassan's question about what we're doing at the high school level. So I will say that all high school graduates in the state of Maryland have to pass a standardized assessment on civics and American government in order to graduate. You can also bypass that by having a certain score on other assessments like a advanced placement exam on US government and politics. So we should be very careful to take inventory of all of these other requirements so that nothing we're doing is overly repetitive and that we're making an authentic effort to redouble what students need to know, not just giving them the exact same knowledge that they may have already learned 4 years ago and just forgot by the time they get to college. I would also submit to you that students are engaged now more than ever. I think that students are extremely concerned about things that are happening right now, whether that's immigration enforcement on campuses, whether that's their programs losing funding or their internships getting canceled. But we need to kind of model civic engagement at the university level if we're going to ask students to be more civically engaged, because not all of our universities here have even commented on many of these same topics that are in the news that students on campuses are talking about every single day. So I hear the common refrain is, we don't want to make ourselves a target by talking about things like that. But how can you expect students to want to make themselves a target if our universities, in many cases, aren't even willing to speak up on some of these very same issues? So I think that we have to be very willing to model what we're asking and expecting of our students. But point well taken from all of my fellow regents.
Any other comments? Bill?
I just have a quick thing that I'd like to pass on because I think it's extremely relevant. Yesterday, I had a conversation with Nancy Grasmick, who was the long-standing superintendent of schools in our state. And we talked about this subject. And she told me she strongly supports mandatory civic education in our universities. And she asked me specifically to mention that at this meeting because she believes that it is important and necessary. So I just wanted to pass along her perspective at her request. Thank you.
I don't know whether this is the appropriate time to comment or, with all due respect, have a region make a motion, and then I will comment. I don't know that I'm speaking for all the presidents, but I'm going to guess, and our shared governance bodies. I think the arguments have been very well delivered here. I think everybody would embrace the idea that we need to do more in this regard, and that we've been talking about it for a long time. And where's the action? I'm reflecting on your original question, Regent Breslin, is it enough? And when one asks a question like that, then one needs to think about the metrics that are required to answer a question. Is it enough? And I think that's what Regent Smerek was getting at. We'll never answer that question. We'll have a lot of opinions in this room, but we'll never answer that question if we don't have metrics. But my important point, and I ask the Regent's consideration of this, and with all respect to Dr. Grasmick, who's a close colleague of mine, I worry about the word mandatory. I worry about the word mandatory. In fact, I would be even stronger in my comments, say, for me, it's unacceptable. Why? Because one of the things we pride ourselves about in higher education, and frankly, in our devotion to higher education in the state of Maryland, is that we continue to embrace the idea that how we teach what are important subjects that you've made the case here is the province of our faculty. That's why we have faculty. It's a fundamental principle in the academy. And I would respect those around this table who say, well, you're not getting the job done. Okay. We hear loud and clear. We have to think about how to meet what you're demanding, but not only will you teach civics, if I can paraphrase what I think is going to be proposed here, but this is the way you'll teach it. That's a challenge to the academy for the faculty and the presidents who lead them, for those shared governance people who participate with us. So I would plead with you, point made, presidents, chancellor, you better get this done, figure out the way to do it. But then we're going to measure and see whether you did it. We're going to hold you accountable. Mandatory, please rethink that respectfully.
Chancellor, thank you for those comments, and you kind of teed me up really well with both of your asks, I think, here. And notwithstanding, we're not asking necessarily to control the curriculum of what we're talking about. We're talking about that we need to establish a course credit, a course in civics. The faculty can still do that with respect to the shared governance piece. When I was preparing for this, I contacted Dr. Armand Alakby from ACTA. And in anticipation of that response of concern of shared governance, he sent me some information. And I would just like to also give a shout out to our colleague, Tom McMillan, because what he made me aware of and sent me was a report on governance for a new era, which was the product of a commission of 22 national higher education leaders, including our esteemed colleague, Tom McMillan. In pages 9 and 10 in particular, there's some quotable materials such as, while faculty have disciplinary expertise, it is lay trustees with considerable life and community experience who can bring the big picture to bear in determining what graduates will need for informed citizenship, effectiveness in the workplace, and lifelong learning. So the point was that this report was basically stating that it is our role to potentially do and guide this type of activity. So I just wanted to share that with you, but I also would just. Yes, yeah.
There's no conflict here.
Right, no, and
it's, you will have a course. I didn't hear that in that.
Yeah, well, that's in essence what we're asking. So we're asking the presidents here to do that, but. And also with respect, Anwar, your comments and Drew Vec, your comments about our students with K through 12. Last week, we were at the annual AGB conference in Chicago, and I was sitting at a table with our chair and some others, and keynote speaker Robin Wright was asked in the Q&A following her address about the need for enhanced civic education teaching on our campuses. Our chair turned to me and said, "Hugh, did you plant that question?" And I said, "No, Madam Chair, I didn't, but I'll be prepared to comment when we discuss this next week." She responded, though, to that question as follows, and I'm paraphrasing her response. She said, "It is not taught in our high schools anymore." So kudos if we're still teaching it in Maryland. From her perspective, it's not taught anymore. The need is critical, and you, meaning us, should do something about it. That was, and she's of course speaking to all the trustees and educators. So Madam Chair, meaning no disrespect for the information we got this morning elective, and it's wonderful, the stuff that's going on and offered up, which we think it's terrific. I think it's terrific. I think we should do more about it. And so I have a motion and relax. I'm not moving that we make the course mandatory because I think we have a process for that. And obviously the process needs to be fulfilled. But my motion is that given that there may be some folks who are skeptical or doubt the need for this anymore, that I think we should commission a survey of recent graduates of our system, to get to your point, Chancellor, including undergrads from all of our universities at our research all of our universities as the research universe. This survey will question their civics knowledge so as to ascertain the outcomes of our current elective efforts and determine if there's a need to do more, such as this proposed civics course requirement for all of our undergrads. This research will either corroborate the need or show us that there is none. So I ask for a second of that motion.
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Any discussion?
Discussion.
I like to be as collaborative about this as possible, and I want to, like, I'm hearing like the chancellor's concerns on this. Like, I get this. This seems like a good compromise to me before we get to the point of mandatory, before we get into these questions of shared governance. It seems like it's a reasonable ask to say, let's figure out what we know and what we don't know. Then we can take the next step of saying, what does this board believe the outcomes ought to be? And then we delegate all of the teaching and learning to our campuses. Do you feel, Chancellor, that this is the right way to proceed, get the data necessary, and then act?
I love the idea of measuring where we're at and then coming together to think about what the right course of action is to improve the number.
I have a couple.
Yes, I,
We have, look at that motion again, you went pretty fast there.
oh, yeah, can you read the?
I will read my motion once again. Given that there is some skepticism still, that we commission a survey of recent system graduates, meaning this is including undergrads from all of our universities as the research universe. The survey will question their civics knowledge so as to ascertain the outcomes of our current elective efforts and determine if there is a need to do more, such as this proposed civics course requirement of all of our undergrads. And this will either prove or disprove the need.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And on behalf of the Council of University System Presidents, I must speak up at this time. This is a very complex issue. And I don't think there's anyone here who wouldn't agree with the premise of what you're proposing to do. Of course, civics is extremely important to public higher education. We are public institutions and we pride ourselves on being here for the public good, preparing citizens to engage in a democratic society. Without a doubt, that is laudable. But as you've heard around here today, there are a number of issues that should be considered, including P through 12th grade and how students come to our institutions. Also, there are many of our institutions, if not all, that are sitting before you that already have courses. I'll speak for my own at this point. Our freshmen are introduced to civics in the freshman seminar, and then we build from there. And so I believe that to move forward, it would be best to be data informed, but I would ask that you begin with what are we doing currently on our campuses to assess that baseline. We are already moving in this direction with the direction of the University System of Maryland strategic plan that embeds civic engagement. And many of us worked on that plan in a shared governance manner to contribute to say, this is where we want to go. So we've already bought in and said we need to do more. And so there's a process already unfolding. I guess I would question why this, whatever you would like to do, isn't embedded in that strategic implementation plan that we're already bought into, rather than layering on a survey. Because while a survey sounds like a good starting point, I think there are many questions that need to be addressed before we decide we're going to do a survey. There are some logistical issues around doing such a survey without getting into the sausage making. And I just wonder how that would even be implemented. So I'd just like to offer to you if we could perhaps use as a framework, the one that we already have, and that is the strategic plan implementation, and then bring together perhaps a small group across our shared governance groups, because we pride ourselves on shared governance. And I would very much like to hear the faculty weigh in on course design, curriculum, whatever you're proposing, if it impacts on the curriculum. So and with all due respect, I really laud the effort that went into the presentations today, your points, but I would ask if we could perhaps use our shared governance model to delve deeper to find out and achieve what you would like to achieve.
Regent Breslin.
Dr. Bro, I'd be remiss if I didn't share this fact when Dr. Alec B. sent me some information. He said they actually surveyed 1,100 universities around the country to determine if they had course requirements. And he said in the University System of Maryland, Bowie State is the only university that has such a requirement. So I applaud you for that at Bowie State. With respect to how we might get that done survey, I know my colleague, again, Tom McMillan had some thoughts and knows some organizations that could easily take on the task of creating a survey for us to do this. So I think, and to the chancellor's point, I think the first step for us and my motion still is that. So we need to vote on that motion, but my
Can I just
motion is
make
exactly
another
that.
footnote? You're emphasizing a course. And what we know and what has been shared here today is that learning happens everywhere, including a co-curricular and those high impact
Correct.
practices that were highlighted. So to try to address this issue with just looking at the curriculum, I think we lose sight of the totality of what we provide, the experiential learning components, where students are able to deepen their knowledge outside of the classroom. So again, what problem are we trying to solve and what is the best mechanism to go there? I just question if we're putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, as my grandmother would say.
With respect, that's why my motion is not to mandate a course. It's to do a survey and research to determine the need.
I have a quick comment.
Yes, Regent Hassan.
Jim, my concern is that we need to first learn what is being taught in the high school or in the middle school related to civic education before we get into this process. Or because, I mean, people may be offered the courses, they take it, but do not sort of sink in with them. And they come into the public life or universities or whatever, probably they don't not sort of keeping up with it. We see that on the math side, we see it on the other side because people get all those courses in the high school or in the middle school, but they did not sort of excel in that. So I mean, I'm just, my concern is that we should not duplicate, as Drew said, that we should not duplicate that, and we should first understand what is going on in the high school right now.
Yeah. Regent Leggett.
I think this approach is a good approach if I know what I'm surveying. And because that could be fraught with some challenges. And so I would suggest the following in terms of a friendly amendment, that the committee develop some guideline surveys. Let us look at that before we say go out and simply do a survey with the components of the students that you just described, because that could be seriously misinterpreted. So I'm not prepared to vote on a survey when I'm not sure what the survey is actually engaged in actually doing. I need to see that survey. And we don't have that. I would gladly vote for it once I've had an opportunity to see precisely what we're surveying and asking those fundamental questions. And I think that could be done fairly rapidly. And if we could do that, I think people probably feel a little bit more comfortable with that. But we need to take that first step, I think, just to be safe about this, before we simply go out and say, a group go out and do a survey and proceed accordingly. So that to me would be, if you will mind, a friendly survey, certainly a second compromise motion to what you suggest.
Regent Ganella.
Thank you. I guess I'm just trying to reconcile everything that we're hearing here. And there seems to be some consensus around a few things, at least from my perspective. One, a need for more information and data. Two, a sense of urgency in wanting to take the next steps, that there's been a lot of discussion for a lot of time and maybe some frustration that we haven't moved further along in this process. And a requirement for shared governance to be part of this activity and solution. So I wonder whether there isn't an opportunity to create a small working group that involves different constituencies with a specific timeline and a specific outcome that they can be held accountable to in order to either design whatever that survey mechanism or data collection mechanism is. And the commitment from the regents that there is going to be funding associated with actual implementation of that, and then in a timeline associated with the results of that, so that we can move this process forward. I agree 100% with the need for it. and the importance of it. But I just think that we need to have a process in place that allows us to get there and get there quickly.
Madam Chair, if I may, I agree, and we can establish a process, timeline, bring in shared governance. I was very excited to hear you say resources. I'm sure Ellen might not have been Ellen Herbst. So, but yes, these are questions that we certainly could study within the shared governance framework, including the regions. They're part of shared governance. And we could do that. So hopefully we can work together on this.
And Regent Bro, would the presidents be supportive of that and add a member to the work group?
Very good outcome to allow us to look at this issue and take in input. I don't want to speak for everyone because I haven't consulted with everyone down this this row. So I think having a process that gets us there allows the voices to be heard among our shared governance groups would be the best way to go. I think that was an excellent suggestion. Thank you.
And Regent McMillan?
First of all, I support the shared governance approach. You know, there's clearly a civic knowledge deficit, and it's growing in this country. I don't think there's anybody in this room that would disagree with that premise. And the question is, what is our responsibility to deal with that, if any? And I think that's really the core issue. And so I support the shared governance idea because there are many ways for us to get feedback back. There could be polling, there's focus groups, there's lots of things, but we ought to know what our baseline is as an institution. So if that's helpful, and I agree with Jeff on this, I think that may be a more rational way to go and approach this whole issue. So,
Chancellor, are you supportive of that as the approach?
I am supportive of a deliberative approach that takes the expertise of our faculty, academic experts, and our shared governance bodies into account without letting this go endlessly, getting it done. We hear the concerns. We agree with the concerns. We need to have an appropriate process.
Okay. And so we're going to
Just a quick question. When you say without letting it go endlessly, I guess that's what my concern is. That's why without letting it go endlessly, I guess that's what my concern is. How do we have a timeline? Do we want to?
We'll establish.
Yeah.
We'll establish. And so, well, there's not going to be a motion. We're going to table the motion and instead stand up a work group that's going to examine what it will take to do it, and then we'll bring back Hugh's motion once we have the
Madam Chair, I don't mean any disrespect, but I think Jeff's motion was the work group would stand well, no, his comments were to stand to help create the content of a survey or how we would go about doing that. But the motion needs to stand to actually do the survey, that we want to do the survey. And maybe we add to that we will form a work group that's going to look at how we go about doing a survey. That would be my motion.
okay. So we need real wording on a real motion. We need real wording on a real motion.
Well,
I
mean, I gave my motion with respect to the need for a survey. And I guess adding to that would be recognizing that we want to stand at a work group to work on who and how we go about creating the survey to establish whether there is a need or not.
For Denise, what is the wording for the motion? We still need wording for the motion.
I think I just did that, didn't I?
Okay.
Do you want me to give this a try? So it would be something along the lines of we're moving as a board, charging the chancellor with putting together a work group to develop a survey that will enable the board to understand the content knowledge of civic understanding among either our students or our recent graduates. So I think what Hugh's trying to get at, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is you want the board to take a stand that this is going to happen. Yes. And the question is, what is the content of it and what is the right process for doing that? And to that, we delegate to the chairman. to the chancellor.
That's my
Yeah,
motion.
Okay.
that's exactly
my
what we
motion.
need. So Andy, can you
Madam Chair,
repeat it again for Denise to write down? You did a good job. And then President. Yeah, wait, we'll come back as soon as we get this motion correctly in the record.
So given this board's interest in understanding the civics knowledge of our students and recent graduates, this board is tasking the chancellor with putting together a work group to develop a survey with all of our shared governance partners to get at this question of what our students and recent graduates know, so that survey can then come back before the board to Ike's point, for the approval of the board, for the administration of the device.
And may I make a friendly amendment?
No.
With a timeline. With a timeline.
Yes.
Do you agree to that?
I've taken a Regent Bradley's position.
90 days.
Within 90 days.
Perfect.
Madam Chair, is that good?
Yes.
You're good. Okay.
Denise, do you have that?
Yes, I plan on using the device.
Okay. Yes.
I'm a recovering lawyer. I'm very confused about this. Is this going to be a graduation mandate? Because if it's not,
No.
well, I'm just saying, hold on now. If it's not, then students get to choose whether they're going to do this survey or not. And if that's the case, what kind of data are you actually going to get? And the questions in a survey, it's just like a poll. The specifics of what you ask could dramatically change the conclusion that is reached in this survey. So I still think, voting on a requirement to do a survey is just premature. I think if you do the work group first and then come back and say, here's the content, this is what we think it's going to achieve, then you can say we should have this mandated survey. But if it's not a mandate, then it'll be those students who want to take it, they will take it. Those who don't, they won't. And so you don't get the kind of information that I think you really are trying to get to. What's the full range of the understanding of our young people?
I would just offer, and I don't disagree, and I'm not speaking for anybody else other than myself. I think we're a little hung up on the word survey at the moment. My understanding was that we are standing up a working group with a 90-day timeline, and that the regents are suggesting and asking for that we collect data in order to inform, working with shared governance, what the next steps in this process are going to be.
That was my understanding when I said.
Whether that
Yeah,
data
you're
collection is a survey or some other mechanism that some of the experts in this world of research are going to help provide us is still to be determined, but I don't think.
I agree with that. I just thought you were about to vote on mandating a survey.
No, that's why we worked hard to rephrase the motion. Denise, read back the motion.
Could you use a microphone? It's difficult to hear.
Denise, you want to sit here?
The revised motion that Regent Smerrick raised does say that the work group would develop a survey. So the motion does say that a survey will be developed.
How about a feedback mechanism?
Could we use a friendly amendment to say strategy? Would you accept a friendly amendment? No.
Data collection, maybe. Data collection.
Data collection strategy.
Yeah.
To develop
Data collection strategy.
Yeah, instead of the word survey.
Yeah. Kurt, does that satisfy the lawyer in you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'll put it to bed now.
Okay. So
as I have written, and please correct me because I'm sure there are errors in here. Given the board's interest in understanding civics knowledge, the board charges the chancellor to put together a work group to develop a data collection strategy with shared governance partners to better understand what our students know with regard to civics within 90 days. I'll clean it up.
Yes.
Perfect, perfect.
Okay, now we have a motion. Louis, you want to second it again?
Second the revised motion.
Okay. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Okay. Where are we? First of all, Dr. Lynch, thank you. Thank you and the team for all of the work that you've done. I think it was somewhat fortuitous in 2018, we started this activity. And we've come a long way since that time when we were trying to figure out what was going on the charts. And we have a lot longer to go. And I think that gathering the information and the thoughts from the wider body will certainly help us understand what we'd like to do next and next. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And we'd also like to thank you for stimulating a rather robust discussion this morning on the board. And we even got the presidents engaged this morning, so it's all good. So we're going to move right along to the chancellor's report.
Oh, gosh. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm exhausted. In all sincerity, I thank Regent Breslin. He and I have been talking about this for a long time, and I'm grateful for his leadership and his poking at us on this matter. And I think we've made some progress. I too want to extend a special welcome to our Frostburg State Interim President, Dr. Darlene Smith, whose friendship I have treasured for quite a while. And I'm on everybody's behalf very grateful for her willingness to, if I may say it, step out of retirement and answer the call. It's a lesson for all of us. In order to abbreviate what could be an even longer report, Regents, than I usually give, I'll ask that you read my written comments for some very impressive system-wide achievements. Here's the short version. Our academic excellence is celebrated in the latest U.S. News grad school rankings. Our innovation is reflected in the system's new ranking for United States patents, 8th among the nation's public institutions. Our international reach is recognized with 33 Fulbright students, 10 scholars across the system. Our civic engagement is acknowledged with several schools named voter-friendly campuses for exceptional student registration and voting rates. And illustrating our service are several universities offering education, retraining, and career support for out-of-work Marylanders. Federal layoffs and cuts affect Maryland's economy more acutely than any other states, and this help is a lifeline for our neighbors who really need us. Thank you all. Turning to our individual universities, let me start with the host. Towson just earned Research University classification from the Carnegie Foundation. This is intended to be merely a prelude to R2 status, which I know is of a priority ambition for President Ginsburg and his team. And I want to point out Towson's abiding leadership in education, in preparing teachers. Always Towson is faithful to its roots. As a key partner in Maryland's K-12 blueprint, Towson provides comprehensive support to over 600 community schools statewide. Schools that provide holistic, wraparound support to students and families, promoting equitable education and strong neighborhoods. Thank you, President Ginsburg. The American University's role as an anchor institution, and we heard something about this, is something UBalt President Kurt Schmoke explored in the Baltimore Sun. Many of you saw his piece. He said the ideal is that an individual's worth will be matched with their ability to contribute to the greater good. That what universities do well, his own included, is to solve complex problems for their communities. These solutions are what we're celebrating, he said, during UBalt's centennial year. So thank you, President Schmoke. Speaking of solutions, the School of Medicine at UMB has developed a CT scan technique to help oncologists better predict how head and neck cancers will respond to certain therapies, tipping the scales towards survival. So President Ward, on behalf of President Gerald, thank you. At Coppin State, the College of Business has launched the Microsoft Scholars Program, offering select students invaluable exposure to career pathways in the technology and entertainment sectors. President Jenkins, great work. At UMCS, researchers have found that hurricanes can stimulate toxic algal blooms, carrying significant environment and human health impacts. With climate change accelerating stronger and wetter tropical storms in coastal regions, the UMCS research is critical to our mitigation and adaptation strategies. Thank you, President Morales-Wilhelm. Speaking of climate change impacts, saltwater intrusion is threatening the Eastern Shore's biggest crops, corn, soybeans, wheat. So UMES is working with farmers to study salt-tolerant switchgrass as an alternative crop. Switchgrass can be used for feedstock and biofuel production and potentially can reduce nutrient pollution entering the bay. So I'm sure Regent Addicts is saluting you, President Anderson. Let me round out this coastal theme with Salisbury University. This fall, Salisbury will offer Maryland's first coastal engineering major, featuring project-based instruction that prepares graduates to protect our shorelines and build sustainable coastal communities. Provost Couch, thank you. And with grant funding from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which we call NIST, UMBC is going to build a quantum science institute, supporting graduate fellowships, new quantum courses and programs, and equipment to establish and enhance quantum laboratories. President Shears Ashby, thank you. UMGC has teamed up with Amazon Web Services to promote the AWS Cloud Institute, where learners with little or no technical background can train for entry-level cloud computing roles. And Provost Palmietta, also congratulations to President Fowler and you on your institution award from the Council of College and Military Educators. That's a recognition that means quite a lot. Bowie State is convening its fellow HBCUs for collective impact. Last month, Bowie gathered aspiring teachers from all 4 Maryland HBCUs, offering them support as they prepare for their licensure exam. And last week, Bowie brought together universities, policymakers, and partners for the inaugural HBCU Prison Education Summit to scale our work at Maryland's correctional facilities. I know Regent Wood will be happy to learn more about that. So thank you, President Bro. At Frostburg State, new data show rising enrollment, rising retention rates for the third straight year. And Dr. Smith is going to carry it further, I'm sure. College Park is celebrating 3 new fellows of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. That's a prestigious association that promotes actionable science for the benefit of all people. So timely. College Park now has more than 110 AAAS fellows, which is an incredible distinction, President Pines. The USM at Southern Maryland welcomed leaders in regional K-12 and higher education for a summit on strengthening the teacher prep pipeline. Southern Maryland's innovative work and tight collaboration is a model we might replicate for the statewide impact that is needed. Thank you, Dr. Abel. And I know Regent Leggett salutes that work. The universities at Shady Grove celebrated National Children's Dental Health Month with 40 UMB dentistry students providing free oral health care to more than 24 young patients at USG's state-of-the-art facility. Thank you, Dr. Kademian. And the USM at Hagerstown welcomed prospective students to explore programs in business, healthcare, education, IT, and social sciences, showcasing the partnership that brings system-wide excellence to local students. Thank you, Jacob Ashby. Let me pivot now to the landscape of federal orders affecting higher education. Orders still causing significant confusion and concern, frankly, at our universities. At our meeting in February, I addressed the proposed cut to the NIH indirect cost rate, a cut that would cost the system in the near term more than $60 million and cost the state far more as the economic impact of our R&D in our institutions would, of course, shrink alongside the federal dollars, the research dollars. So Maryland joined a lawsuit to block implementation of the rate cut, and a permanent injunction was granted this week, barring NIH from capping indirect costs at 15%. The administration has appealed the ruling. This isn't the only NIH-related lawsuit we've joined. Last Friday, a coalition of 16 states, including Maryland, filed suit to end delays in the NIH grant application process and restore grants terminated by the administration. Both the slowdown in new grant funding and the revocation of awarded grants are causing irreparable harm to our science. We heard a lot about scientific accomplishments related to our health this morning. Science underpins what we can do in terms of human health and well-being, and without being dramatic, yes, it's life-saving. Maryland joined another suit last Friday, this one to stop the dismantling of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, together with 6 other small agencies. And as higher ed, we suffered a loss that same day as the Supreme Court ruled that grants under 2 federal teacher training programs could be terminated while the lawsuit progresses. The ruling lifted a temporary restraining order that Maryland and other states had won to protect the Teacher Quality Partnership and SEED programs. These are programs and grant funding which are intended to recruit and prepare teachers for hard-to-staff schools. So no question, this is a blow to our work in addressing the teacher shortage and filling Maryland classrooms with capable, caring teachers. Still, we persist and hope ultimately in that particular lawsuit for a favorable outcome. Meanwhile, a preliminary injunction remains in place barring OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, from freezing federal grant disbursements. Maryland joined this lawsuit with 22 states, arguing that the funding freeze affecting healthcare, disaster relief, and education puts vital services and lives in jeopardy, and that the move halts congressionally approved spending without legal authority. And in another lawsuit, I submitted a declaration on behalf of the system attesting to the material harm that will likely be done to our students and our universities should the U.S. Department of Education slash its personnel by 50%. Our students, colleagues, regents, all of you, our students rely on the department for Pell Grants, for student loans, for work study. 85,000, half of our students, receive federal aid. And we saw the consequences last year of disrupting that process. I believe that cutting department staff by half would eclipse the FAFSA challenges we had last year. It also puts at risk millions of dollars in grants, vital data collection, and our students' civil rights. And finally, 2 days ago, the system signed on to support an amicus brief submitted by the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration. That brief supports a preliminary injunction to stop the administration from revoking student visas without cause. And arresting, detaining, and deporting non-citizen students and faculty without due process. The revocation, and you've seen this in the media, the revocation of visas is already happening at our USM universities. I will tell you, and I will expand on this shortly, our students are scared. Not just visa holding students, but any student with non-citizen status. I've heard from some in very poignant ways personally, who carry their documents at all times, lest they be detained. I sat with the student government on Sunday, as I often do with their meetings at their invitation. And I heard from one elected student leader who told us very movingly about her father always teaching her to keep her green card in the safe, in the safety deposit box, because, and I didn't know this, to replace a green card, if you lose it, is an audacious process, very expensive, etc. Well, she's not listening to her father anymore. Because she feels more secure carrying her green card with her. We heard from another student who always carries his passport now. People may have different views on this. Maybe one might think that it's appropriate that they do. I'm simply sharing with everybody a reflection on student behaviors that reflect fear. The AG's office has issued guidance for our universities on immigration enforcement. And the immigration clinics, I'm happy to say, at both of our law schools, UMB's and UBalt's, and I appreciate President Gerald and President Schmoke for responding to my call. They have offered their services to affected students. Some of our students who are impacted can afford lawyers, many cannot. So again, thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Roger. Thank you, Catherine. Anxiety remains, of course it does. And so I'd like to end, Regents, by talking about our students a bit more. I hope it's always appropriate to talk about students. At our system-wide Student Success Symposium at UMBC last Friday, which was an extraordinary event, Regents, the coming together of all of our university personnel that are specifically charged with student success. I need you to know that I addressed student serving teams from our collective universities, the people that work most closely with our students. And then, as I said, over the weekend, I met with the USM Student Council and other student leaders. And yes, they did share how vulnerable and isolated they feel. They shared a fear that the diversity we share, not diversity as an ideology, the diversity that we share might now be seen as a liability. So I'd like to reprise just a portion of what I've said to our students and to those who support them. It's a theme you've already heard me speak to, what it means, you know, this thing we have plastered on that 2030 plan to be a student-centered system. That was the big switch in that plan, not focusing on ourselves, but to be student-centered. It means that our policies, our programs, our partnerships, our practices serve an essential goal, that all students can come to the USM for their education, and all students can succeed once they're here. Student-centeredness is still our mantra because student-centeredness is still our mandate. It's still the foundation of our strategic plan. Students are still the beating heart of who we are and what we do. And I said that if you embrace student-centeredness, then you have to embrace the full diversity of our students. They are different in race and ethnicity and first language, in age and income, and potentially a disability, in ideology and experience and religion, and gender identity and sexual orientation, in their status as veterans and parents and immigrants. Our diversity is not a matter of belief, it's a fact. And our mission is therefore to create the conditions and lay in the supports and develop the strategies that help every single one of these students thrive. Not through some monolithic action, because we don't have a student monolith. There is no typical student in the USM. There's no exemplar. Our students aren't totems. We are, all of us, different from one another. And so a commitment to equity means simply that we see the differences and how they might influence the way our students learn and the barriers that might be thrown into our students' paths. And then we dismantle them. One by one, we dismantle them. That's a student-centered system. That's a student-centered higher education system. The student-centered system puts students above structure, puts students above politics, puts students above everything. So I told the cast assembled last Friday, and I said it again on Sunday, and I say it here. Our values haven't changed. They don't need to. Not if we pledge ourselves to the commitment that all students will get what's fair, which is, boiling it down, a legitimate chance at what we, all of us in this room, I know we've used this expression, we've long called the American dream. So I'm deeply grateful to everyone across the system doing this kind of vital work. I'm grateful for their commitment and their collaboration, and yes, their courage, for their unwavering belief that what they're doing matters. It always has. Madam Chair, I conclude my report.
Thank you, Chancellor. Any questions for the Chancellor? Yes, Drew.
Thanks. I just want to thank the Chancellor for sharing some of the remarks that students shared in our USM Student Council meeting on Sunday. And Chancellor Perman just stated that our values as a system have not changed. And I certainly agree with that. And I think all of the regents and our presidents know that. And I hope that everybody in this room knows that. But I would just say that I believe students are starting to question whether or not that's in fact the case. So while I have the presidents here, I would encourage them, and this is just me, not trying to speak on behalf of this board or anybody else besides me, to evaluate what kinds of communication you're sending out to your students and making sure that message that our values haven't changed are really getting across to students, because I fear that message may be getting lost in the weeds a little bit.
Any other comments, thoughts? Hearing none, we'll now have the Council of University System Faculty. Oh, wait, sorry, Fernando.
Oh, there it is. Sorry. Thanks for, I just wanted to respond briefly to Drew as well as to the Chancellor's presentation. First of all, thank you. I just want to give you one example. I've been having town halls with students across my campuses. The question that keeps coming up is, are we doing it DEI anymore? Is DEI gone, right? And what I've responded back is that DEI is one of 5 priority goals in the USM strategic plan 2030. So it's not going away. The system is not walking away from that. And we're putting activities in place. We're continuing with our DEI activities as we have all the time. So that, I think that has been, from my students, the primary question coming back from what has happened recently. The second comment I wanted to make is relates to immigration issues as it relates to our students, but also as it relates to our faculty. Because I think it's an important, it's an important consideration. And I've had town halls with my faculty, and I have been very frank. I've said, listen, if you don't have to travel overseas, don't. It's as simple as that. Be very careful. The Chancellor was referring to the papers. Being myself a faculty of immigrant origin, I tell you, I'm a U.S. citizen. I carry literally my U.S. passport card in my wallet, because you never know, who's gonna walk up to you and ask you. And I speak with an accent, and my name's Fernando, so there's that. The accent part, my wife thinks is sexy, but that's okay. So I think we have to exercise some common sense, and I'm of the philosophy that if someone's pointing a gun at your head, you don't spit in their face. You try to make the situation as less escalatable as possible, and try to de-escalate. And that's been my advice to our campus, to our faculty, to our students, and I think that's a rational approach to dealing with this. So that's just a little reaction to the last 2 interventions. Thank you.
Council of University System Faculty, Dr. Haberback.
Good morning, Chair Gooden, members of the Board of Regents, Chancellor Perman, and university presidents. Thank you for having me this morning, and thank you for hosting. President Ginsburg, he'll be back in a minute. It's always a point of pride for having you all here on our beautiful campus. I must mention that I'm choking on a piece of egg as we talk, and this is just the way that my luck goes sometimes, so if I cough, please excuse me. Why did I eat an egg right before speaking? Who knows? But I did. So, as you know, the committee has been actively engaged in working on CUSIF initiatives and discussing how current events impact our teaching, students, and research. The Education Policy Group has started their first draft of a faculty bullying policy, or of overlooking the USM faculty bullying policy. As you all know, faculty have been extremely busy, and as you all are, and we recognize the need to balance our workload while staying responsive to the evolving landscape. On Wednesday, we convened as a full board where our meeting was actually stopped by a point of order, which was brought to the floor, and then a motion for censure was moved and seconded. This resulted in a discussion and then a vote. Again, with my luck, it was a tie vote, and therefore the chairperson had to break the vote on the motion of censure, which I did vote, and the motion of censure stood and was moved. This is the first time that this has happened in the knowledge of our CUSIF's history, and we do not take this lightly. It was very difficult. We are currently working through the logistics and being advised by legal now. In May, we will have a full agenda wherein we hold elections, discuss a resolution, and discuss how recent events, whether societal, political, or technological, are influencing our teaching and students. We will also, as an executive committee, consider a complaint that has come in and a response to that complaint. Again, this is unprecedented and we are being guided by legal. In my notes, I may have added that things would be shared. However, based on us being guided by legal, they have not been shared. As I have stated in my past reports, we will also continue to discuss the role of CUSIF, our bylaws, and our Constitution, which is something that I have stood by for the past 2 years. We are an advisory body to the Chancellor who reports to the Board of Regents, and I try to keep that at the forefront of what we do. We will also continue to discuss the role CUSIF plays in individual campus issues as they come up. Since this is my second to last meeting as chairperson, I'd like to take this opportunity to shift the focus for the remainder of my report to a topic that is central to our institutions, the work of the faculty. While I cannot speak on behalf of all faculty members, I will share a few examples from my own experiences that I believe reflect the broader dedication, challenges, and contributions of our faculty community. I must say that my reports are usually very brief, and everybody commends me on that. And therefore, I'm going to reuse a couple of those minutes that I've saved over the past 2 years. And I was going to do this regardless of our meeting yesterday, but here I am. So please give me a few minutes of grace that I think I banked. As faculty members, we have many jobs. For example, we teach, we do research, and we serve. Now I'd like to focus on the teaching aspect of a faculty member's role. As an educator, what's always at the forefront when stepping into the classroom is twofold: the course content and the individual needs of students. And Chancellor, I'm afraid that it will look like we were in cahoots with this because my statements are going to revolve around students the same as yours, because that's why we're all here. Every class is a balance between delivering the material with clarity and rigor and responding to the unique dynamics, backgrounds, and learning differences that students bring with them. Faculty are working hard in this very complex part and ever-changing part of our role here on campuses. Many days, again, I'm only speaking for myself, this work can be absolutely exhausting. Teaching requires not just preparation and knowledge, but emotional energy, adaptability, and patience. But at the end of the day, it's also the reason we're here, the students. They are at the center of everything we do. And often it's the little things, a student's breakthrough moment, a thoughtful question, or a note of appreciation that reminds us why we keep going. Those moments may seem small, but they carry me, and I believe many faculty, through. I will also state that as a teacher and a lifelong teacher, there is something that is very relaxing about standing in front of a classroom, putting yourself to the side and saying, the people in this room are what matter now. And everything about yourself steps away, and now you're into what the students' needs are. I am now going to share a personal story as a faculty member because such moments are what continue to highlight the importance of what we're doing in the classroom and in the USM. I was not going to share this at first, but when I got it, I thought about how can I link this into the speech. Over COVID, I decided that every negative thing that happens, I look for something positive. And the beginning of my report was a very difficult report, so I'm going to turn it into something positive. And this is not a humble brag, and that was my fear that that's how it would sound, but it is not. Each first semester, we welcome a new group of student teachers as they begin their journey into the classroom. We start with an orientation in our department. It's a seminar where all supervisors and professors gather with all of the new student teachers. We do this on the first Monday and Tuesday of the semester. We introduce ourselves as faculty, share a bit about the department, and then we walk through what seems to be like small and silly logistics. But we are actually answering vital questions. What should one wear in the classroom? What time does school start? If there's an issue with a student, how do you talk to your mentor teacher? These are basic but important aspects of daily life in school that our student teachers need as a foundation for the days that will follow. During this orientation, we serve food. We found that the students are hungry. They've had a long day. Usually we serve pizza because I order it. I'm very good at ordering pizza. And we try to create a welcoming and relaxed experience. I typically give an introduction and offer a few tips, and then I run around and I deliver the pizza while more specific questions are answered. I do this for two reasons. One is that the students getting up and down and getting their pizza, and then me feeling the way I do about germs, watching them touch all the pieces, I decided I could serve it. I also worked at Applebee's, Dairy Queen, and I'm the mother of three, so I'm very comfortable in this role. Last month, 2 months after this orientation took place, I came in to work on an exceptionally challenging day. I was surprised that there was a note on my desk from a student, and this student I do not know, but he thanked me, not for the content of the seminar, but simply for serving him pizza and for having a professor who served him pizza and taking the time to talk to him. He said that when he's in a position like mine someday, he hopes that he remembers to serve students and support them in the same way because it meant so much to him that day. That note stayed with me, and on that day, I needed that note. Yes, I felt appreciated, but more than that, I felt seen as a teacher. Yes, but also as a human being trying to model care, attention, and presence. And that to me is at the heart of what we do as faculty. That is why we strive for to teach, support, to model, and to help students find their way. On the days when we feel heavy or overwhelmed, it's those little things and moments that ground me, and I believe they ground many of us. And again, they remind us of why we're here. We make a difference, and when the day gets tough, I hope we can all stay centered on the truth. It's about the students, how we can support them, how we can continue to show up for them, and how we continue to care. I will leave you with my second favorite quote. My first favorite quote is from The Great Gatsby, and it has no pertinence to what we're discussing, although I will share it with you at another time if you'd like to know it. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. And I hope that that is how we can go forth.
Thank you.
That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Haverbeck. Any questions for Dr. Haverbeck? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to Dr. Patricio for the Council of University System Staff.
Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Regents, Presidents, good morning. I don't have quite so elegant a report for you today as Heather did, but hopefully I will communicate some things of value. So thank you first to President Ginsburg and the staff and faculty of Towson for hosting us. This visit allowed us not only to visit this beautiful campus, gray though it may be, but to hear the beautiful music of one of your most talented students. My written report for you includes the aggregate 2024 shared governance survey findings. This is an annual survey of those staff involved in shared governance on each of our campuses. Each USM president received an individual report with their campus's information, and Chancellor Perman received the full report you see today, as well as the individual campus reports. We have started reviewing the Board of Regents Staff Awards packets. I am thrilled to say that among our 38 submissions this year, 11 are non-exempt submissions, which is a record for us. Creating exempt and non-exempt packets separately and adjusting the award categories for non-exempt specific work was not without its challenges, but I'm pleased with the results. Thank you to the presidents for your support in this process and helping us collect such wonderful nominees. I'd also like to thank the Regents for their support of the changes to the CUS Constitution that we put forth a few weeks ago. It's my hope that these changes will help raise the profile of CUS on our campuses and create a more robust selection process for the honor of serving as a representative within the system. Now to the less joyous portion of my report. As many of you know, the bulk of my day job is in the world of administration, primarily finance and HR. I have to say that there are many ways in which this spring feels reminiscent of early COVID times. The financial uncertainty created by decisions made at the state and federal levels has led to disruption on many of our campuses in the areas of research, student services, and general operations. I will admit that because of my professional work and service on CUS, I feel this more acutely than most as I try to support staff that I oversee and the staff that I represent through these challenging times. Most particularly, my constituents are sorely disappointed in the possibility that COLA, merit, and longevity bonuses up to 4.5% may be granted to bargaining staff and not to non-bargaining staff, the staff that I represent. Beyond this issue of pay compression, which creates significant issues when the budget environment means that equity adjustments are near impossible, it also creates a morale issue. At a time when the state of Maryland should have conserved funds so that we could avoid layoffs as much as possible, we as a system will likely find ourselves with difficult decisions to make. While I was able to justify these inequitable pay practices to staff last year, when we saw a similar, albeit less drastic situation, telling them to continue to trust in shared governance and the ability of the USM to stand strong, the current environment and decisions from state and federal leadership make my position an untenable one. I'm at a loss for words to respond to my constituents who are angry and confused. I get emails, stopped in the hallway, asked questions during meetings. In some ways, I blame myself. Maybe I should have been a stronger advocate for non-bargaining staff. Perhaps I could have done more. We are all being asked to make sacrifices, which is understandable, and most of us stand willing to do so. But I would be remiss in my duty not to share with you the very real impact these decisions are having among non-bargaining staff, and about trust in the institutions, trust in shared governance, and the value placed on the work that we do. I know each of you in this room value staff, but it's because I know you. My ability to shift the perceptions employees hold about why these pay changes are happening is about as strong as my ability to control state budget allocations. I am not so naive as to assume this won't push more people toward unionization and away from shared governance and partnership among staff and campus and system leadership. But as Chair Gooden said this morning, we must all lean in. We face difficult times ahead, that is for certain, made more difficult by decisions beyond our control. I take heart that we stand steadfast as a united USM in supporting, as Chancellor Perman just noted, all of our students and finding success in the educational process. It is simply my hope that the regents and presidents understand the impact of these decisions and continue to use their influence to advocate for all staff collectively, especially for those without a powerful voice in Annapolis. Thank you for your time today and listening to my concerns. And so on that cheery note, I end my report and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions for Dr. Patricia? Seeing none, thank you for your report. We'll now go to the Council of University System Presidents, President Bro.
Thank you and good morning, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, Regents, colleagues, and everyone gathered here today are shared governance leaders. I'd like to acknowledge and thank Towson University President Ginsburg for the wonderful hospitality and for the amazing program last night and the talented student who performed. Also, congratulations on behalf of the Council of University System Presidents to all the awardees that were honored this morning. The Council of University System Presidents met on March 3rd and April 7th via Zoom. These meetings had full agendas as the presidents continue to navigate the spring semester and close out this academic year. On March 3rd, the presidents received an update from the Administration and Finance Division of the System Office and on new and revised HR policies on leave for disaster services, organ donation, and parental bereavement. CUS also heard from the system procurement area about this Chancellor's Directive on best practices for the use of cooperative purchasing. CUS met virtually again on April 7th. At this meeting, the council reviewed an update to the Family and Medical Leave Insurance Policy, or known as FAMLI, FAMLI, from the System Human Resources area. The System Administration and Finance reviewed several items, including a budget update and a proposed vision to the USM HIDA, High Impact Economic Development Activities Policy. The presidents were briefed on the advancement from the advancement area on the Custom Relation Management or CRM project. And then lastly, CUS continues to discuss recent and ongoing changes that have come through the federal and executive orders. We continue to monitor what's happening at the state level as well as the federal level. This concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Bro. Any questions for Dr. Bro? Hearing none, Ms. Gambrell, will turn the podium over to you for the University System of Maryland Student Council.
Good morning, Chair Gooden, Chancellor Perman, the Board of Regents, and University Presidents. And thank you, President Ginsburg, for hosting us today. My report is definitely not going to be able to match up to Heather's and Kalia's today, but I do have a few updates to share on behalf of the Student Council. So shortly after the last Board of Regents meeting, which was back in February, I and some USMSC representatives came together to participate in Advocacy Day in Annapolis, and that was a success overall. Students felt like they were able to convey their advocacy for the USM budget, and we did receive encouraging support. In looking ahead at the next Advocacy Day in 2026, we as a council hope to strengthen our planning and approach to ensure that the student voice remains at the center of our advocacy. We also had two guest presentations at our meetings. One was from Marianne and Rebecca in March to share about the USM Foundation process for inquiries related to sustainable investing. And the other was at our general meeting just this past Sunday from Dr. Jennifer Lynch on student participation in civic education and engagement efforts. Students shared the importance of the education part of civic engagement, including a basic understanding of government, and I would add something that needs to be strengthened in K through 12. Having moved from Singapore to Maryland in the middle of high school, I didn't really get to see civic engagement in the classroom, but I started to learn more through experiential learning in college, be it through my internships, this opportunity that I have here. And I really wish this learning started for me earlier. And also, as part of the education component, being mindful of what gets included in the curriculum and what ends up getting left behind. The other part that we discussed was reframing what civic education actually means beyond voting and the election season. We already know that it entails so much more, but in our messaging and in our marketing to students, or when we assess that metric itself, we often only look at how many students voted or how many voting work groups were formed or how many meetings were made on how to vote and where to vote and more voting. And there are so many other ways I think that we can address and to express how engaged students are within their communities beyond that one metric. And I think that messaging shift itself will encourage more students to come out and identify themselves as students who are civically engaged on campus without actually realizing that they were. This past Sunday, we were also grateful to have Chancellor Perman joined us for a conversation at our meeting. We discussed the importance of tolerance to different languages and the role of that in research, funding to support HBCU specifically, and the strongest emphasis was placed on how students would appreciate more communication and more disclosure from university leadership on ongoing developments, recommendations from the Attorney General that you may be receiving, and what student privacy would look like amid ICE surveillance in our effort to be more student-centered and more direct, per Chancellor Perman's comments. I understand that you're already probably massively flooded in your inboxes right now, and this is just another thing to add on, and it's way easier said than done. But more communication would really, really mean a lot to students right now, as much as is possible and appropriate. A few additional updates include preparing to send our shared governance survey out to students. A report of that will be shared. And we will also be gearing up for USMSC elections next month. And we completed our review of the applications for the Board of Regents Student Excellence Scholarships. And we look forward to review of the candidates today. And finally, I just wanted to give Dr. Lee a shout out for a wonderful Access, Equity, and Student Success Symposium, which some USMSC representatives were able to attend. And I also want to thank Heather and Kalia for keeping students in mind during this time, even while you have a lot on your plate and your own council priorities as well. That means a lot to us. So Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Gambrell? Seeing none, thank you for your report. The next order of business is the consent agenda. Decisions regarding which items to include on the consent agenda were made by me and the committee chairs. However, any regent may request that an item be removed from the consent agenda for separate review and approval. Before I move approval of the consent agenda, I ask if there are any items that any region would like removed from the consent agenda for separate review and discussion. Seeing none, I move approval of all the items on the consent agenda. May I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, our next order of business is the Committee on Finance, which will provide its report on the fiscal year 26 enrollment projections. And I'm going to turn it over to Regent Fish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Each of our institutions submits a 10-year enrollment plan, and this is done in accordance with board policy. This plan outlines goals and also identifies strategies to achieve those goals. The enrollment projections that are included in the board package were reviewed and recommended for approval by the Finance Committee. This is done, we want to ensure transparency and also alignment with the system's goals. And clearly, these projections impact our decisions as it relates to tuition revenue and also capital planning. The projections cover from the fall of 2025 through the fall of 2034. And I have the unique pleasure of serving on both the enrollment work group and also the Finance Committee. So I have the opportunity to look at this data through different lenses. And clearly, our campuses, as we've heard today, are experiencing a period of disruption and at different levels, depending upon the impact of the proposed federal changes to the workforce and research funding. I don't want to take anything away from those challenges and those changes, but there also is clearly an opportunity at this point in time. And it's good to hear that our campuses are looking at serving new student populations, adult learners, and displaced workers. We have shown resilience in the past when we've faced these different disruptions. And just my tenure on the board, we went through a period where there was serious budget challenges. You know, we've had COVID, and last year we had the FAFSA delays. So clearly, today's environment, as in the past, calls for us to make further adjustments. And also, I would suggest creativity as well.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chad Muntz. Chad is our head of the Office of Decision Support and Institutional Research, and he's going to provide an overview of the projections.
Thank you and good morning. Before I talk about the 172,000 students that we're anticipating serving next year, again, thank you for the welcome. I'm Chad Muntz, Associate Vice Chancellor for Decision Support, and I wanted to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues who have helped with the insights that we'll talk about today in the paper that you have read. Ekaterina Sule, our Director of Decision Support, and she represents the effort behind me for collecting and obtaining this data. And then also Candace Carrico, who is our Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs. Unfortunately, she is unable to be here, but she has been instrumental in working with our enrollment planning function across the campuses. And again, assuring that our enrollment planning makes sense with the numbers that we see. All right, so first, just starting off of why we do this, these enrollment projections fulfill multiple strategic and operational functions. First, they are required in board policy to ensure campus demonstrate integrated enrollment planning in the short term, midterm, and long term. So in the short term, these projections inform the operating budget. In the midterm, they guide our academic program approval and our student success. And in the long term, they support our capital planning and facilities investment. These numbers also contribute to Maryland's statewide enrollment projections, and I provide them as a resource to MHEC. And they're also part of your board action item today as part of the financial responsibilities of the board. So to look at the financial management cycle, we are placed right here, situated in the middle of the cycle at the bottom or 6 o'clock position of this clock. We are currently at this stage. Next, we will move into tuition, room, board, and fee rates in June, and the enrollment will impact those decisions. Then we move into our operating and capital budget. Then next fall, per board policy, I come back and provide a great report about the outcomes of our enrollment plan. These numbers feed into our audited financial statements and then are part of our debt issuance. So overall, we demonstrated over the years really great enrollment management planning and accuracy, and that serves as providing support for how we issue debt and the strategies for our capital and operating plans in the future. Okay, so getting into the numbers, the top line represents the total enrollment, where this is the historical look at our enrollment over the last 15 to 18 years. You can see the dotted line is the overall trajectory as we've gone up and down, depending on the environment, COVID, emerging out of the recession, et cetera. The gold line or the total enrollment closely mirrors our black line, which is the undergraduate enrollment. That line tends to have more volatility in the overall numbers. And then our gray line represents the graduate enrollment. That's about 40,000. It moved down to around 38, and we're moving back up to 39,000. The last dot on these lines include our fall 25 enrollment projections, or the one-year change that we expect for next year. So we're right on the same trajectory. And if you look at the recent years, we're building on that same steady success as we've come out of the COVID impact and pandemic. So what is changing for next fall? What do we expect? First, you'll note on the left-hand side, we're expecting about 1,400 more students. UMGC accounts for just over 1,200 of those students, and they're staying on that same trajectory that we provided last year. Then we see some changes at our other institutions, some up, some down. Overall, the overall change is about 200 students across our other institutions. Your eye might move quickly to the two institutions that are communicating very small enrollment decreases in the next fall term. One is Bowie's enrollment dip, which is attributable to the new student enrollment in recent years, just a few less, even though it's been very robust in the number of new students, slightly less in the last couple of years, fewer returning students. And they also cite some ongoing administrative changes that might be impacting the returning students numbers. And then also UMBC, and what's going on with UMBC is a couple of years ago at the graduate level, they had a very large international population. And intentionally, I mentioned this last year and this year, they are pulling back on the international graduate enrollment and rebalancing with domestic graduate enrollment. Their undergraduate numbers are also expected to increase. So in time, we will see these numbers move back up. So what does our 10-year trajectory look like? It looks very similar to last year. So the black line is this year's trajectory, and that red dotted line is last year's trajectory. You can see it's almost exactly the same. We exceeded our enrollment in this past fall 24 by just a little bit, and we're picking right up where we left off last year, same manageable plan and the same manageable growth rate. And for next fall, it'll be about 172,000. And then again, by fall 2035, we're looking at 195,000. So the 10-year growth, this is just a quick summary about what is changing over the next 10 years. About 60% of our growth in the next 10 years will be at UMGC, 3% at UMB and University of Maryland, Baltimore, and University of Maryland, College Park. About 11% at our 3 HBCUs, about 3% with Frostburg and U-Balt, and then the remainder of just over a quarter percent, or about a quarter percent, is at Salisbury, Towson, and UMBC over the 10-year plan. Now, the one question that you may have is the accuracy of our enrollment planning. The board policy calls for plus or minus 3%, asks that our enrollment management plan is sized to that confidence interval, if you will. So even though there is a single number, you might consider that our enrollment projections are plus or minus 3% is the direction that we're going. So in the past 10 years, this is the accuracy of our enrollment projections. We've been within that gray bar, or plus or minus 3%, including the COVID year where we did 2 enrollment projections, and that's about the 5th midpoint in our enrollment projections. Both of them were within 3%. Before we knew what would happen with COVID, we were a little bit under, and then after we had the COVID pandemic, we projected less enrollment than we actually received. So we actually overachieved. The top of this gray bar would indicate that enrollment was, the projected enrollment is greater than actual, which would indicate a plan that if we didn't achieve that enrollment would less revenue. And if it's below the gray line, that would indicate that we overachieved enrollment. So the midpoint is where we've been the last couple of years, often within 1% or 2%. At each institution, we should note that that is different, requires different precision. At our small campuses, 3% is just a couple hundred students. At our larger campuses, it might be thousands of students. So you can see that the margin for error is different for each campus. For the system, it's about 5,000 students is 3%, as we're thinking about what may happen next fall. All right, in total, I will just summarize that we have increased enrollment for 2 straight years. If this is the same steady increase, the campuses are building on that same path that's been successful, same kind of number of students, looking at our strong retention rates that we've also been improving over the last few years. The 10-year is on that same trajectory that we presented last year, moving up as we see successes in recent years. We keep the plan moving forward. I will say, as we've been improving our near-term accuracy, our midterm accuracy has also been improving. So if I looked back just a few years ago, I would see that our enrollment projections for this fall were also within 3%. So the calibration is improving. With that, that is a summary of my remarks for the enrollment projections. This is a board action item, but I will answer any questions.
Any questions, Tom?
Question I asked you a few
Yes.
minutes ago about all this dislocation and impact on enrollment.
Sure. So there will be another presentation here in a couple of minutes that will talk about our financial planning committee of the whole. So some of those comments will be there. What I do know so far, the question was, what's the impact of federal workers in Maryland, which counties, and what are we seeing thus far? I can say it's about 100,000 federal workers, I believe, in the state of Maryland, but not all of those have been impacted. But I will bring up Senior Vice Chancellor Herbst here to continue. Yeah.
So if I can ask to hold, I have some specific numbers to share with that regard in the presentation on financial planning. But I think what I will say is Chad continues to lead the entire team across the system, the hundreds of people making up all of the folks across all the universities in the system office who are very carefully monitoring what's going on. And you'll hear me talk about in our financial planning, we are asking folks to do their best estimates based on what they're seeing on the ground with applications, with deposits and things like that. So we'll be monitoring more closely over these next few months to see what changes, if any, occur. But I'll talk about some of the macro movement in the state that could affect these numbers.
And I would just add that the enrollment work group with the change in focus is going to be looking at the potential impact to enrollment and then how that impacts the financials.
Yeah, particularly with, looming Medicaid cuts and the ripple effect through other sectors, could have some impact.
Any other questions for Chad?
If not, seeing none, this is an action item. I will go ahead and make a motion to approve and accept the enrollment projections. Is there a second?
Second.
Did I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Second. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Okay. Our next item is the committee of the whole, and first up is an introduction of a HIDA task force policy. Over the past 6 months, staff from the University System of Maryland office conducted a comprehensive review of the board's existing high-impact economic development activity project. Regents Merrick will introduce the proposed policy revisions. Regents Merrick.
Thank you. And I can't add too much to what the chair said. Given that we had the same conversation in February, what is before you today is identical. The language that we reviewed, which was just an informational item in February, it's coming now before the board as an action item. Essentially, the board was tasked. The committee task force was tasked with studying the HIDA policies that we have and our institution's implementation of them. We identified some areas for improvement. As an aside, I will say, as many of you know, the legislature was considering legislation this year on this topic. They decided not to move forward on that, but our recommendation is to continue to move forward with the reforms that we have in this package because it is in the best interest of HIDA, the system, and our institutions. I want to say thank you to Ellen and her team for doing an extraordinary job with all the research necessary to make this happen. Ellen, anything else we need to say or do?
I just want to thank the work group members who gave us such good guidance in the meetings we had.
And again, this language is unchanged from February when you saw it. So I will move acceptance of the reformed language, the reformed language for the HIDA policy that is in the board book.
Second.
Very good. Anything else, Madam Chair?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. That's it. Thank you, Regent Merrick. And now we'll turn it over to Ellen Herbst, who's going to try and tell us about how we're going to solve those financial challenges we've talked about this morning.
Get ready, I'm about to pull out my crystal ball. Next slide. So I want to start with just reviewing kind of what we're facing on a macro level, and then talk a little bit about how this is different than the last most previous financial challenge we faced, being the pandemic. And then tell you what the chancellor and the board chair and finance committee chair have led us through and what we're doing with the universities to plan. So this is kind of the stating the obvious chart, but I wanted to give some context. So first, and you will hear after me, you will hear from Susan Lawrence, and she's going to do a recap of the legislative session, but I do need to start with the fact that legislative session is over. We now have a budget for the governor to be signed, or maybe is signed. And in that budget, the USM will take a 7% year-over-year cut in base appropriations. That's roundly $155 million. So I'm not going to talk a lot about other state impacts on this chart, but I thought I had to lead with that. But let's talk about the other macroeconomic impacts that we could be facing. In March, the Board of Revenue Estimates of the state estimated a $280 million reduction in revenue for the state for the remainder of the fiscal year 25 and all of fiscal year 26. Why did they do that? And this goes to Regent McMillan's question about the impact of federal workforce in the state and what that might do to enrollment. In 2023, there were 161,000 federal jobs located in Maryland. There were 252,000 Maryland households who reported a total of $26.9 billion in federal wages in the state. That's an average annual income of $126,000, higher than average. And I will get into in the next chart, highest vulnerability of any state in our United States. So the issue of declining income tax revenue from increased unemployment is real and will have an impact on the state budget, as well as having an impact on how we project our own financial position. Then the next thing we're dealing with is the threats to our federal research portfolio. Just for context, last year, FY24, we expended $1 billion in federal grant expenditures. And we're very proud of our grant portfolio, very proud. We're nationally ranked, of course. Our grant portfolio has long carried a risk in it, which is it is heavily, heavily dependent on the federal funding. We do not have a diverse source of grant funding in our grant portfolio. It is almost wholly federal. And when you add in the amount of pass-through funding we get from the state that is federally sourced, this is an area of risk. We're facing three very different, but all impact, different things happening on the federal research front. First, as has been well reported, we're seeing delays, stops and starts on existing approved appropriated grants. What has been less reported, it's starting to be reported more, is we're also seeing a significant reduction in the awarding of new grant dollars. In that $1 billion that we spent last year, about $430 billion of it was from the HHS, the one that's been the most reported on, obviously, with disruptions to grant funding. So we're facing these delays or stops in existing grants, but perhaps the bigger issue is the amount of new grant money that is not flowing. Additionally, we've all seen the news about questions about what the F&A or indirect cost recovery rate should be. And while we've gotten a temporary stay on the 15% announcement, we do anticipate that there will be ongoing discussions and perhaps some action on capping recovery rates. These are very real costs. They're the costs of laboratories. They're the costs of running research, everything other than the actual researchers themselves and the direct materials associated with the research. So it is something we're watching. It's about 150 million if we were to go to the 15% versus what we have as an average today. So then we have the potential impacts to enrollment from the macroeconomic changes I have previously mentioned. Next slide. This is not an original slide. This was reported. It's part of usaspending.gov, and this was the article in the Baltimore Banner on March 27th. The bar charts just show the breakdown and the increase from 2019 of federal monies flowing to Maryland. So these are not federal worker incomes. These are grants, contracts, direct payments to individuals and others. Others are loans, insurance, and other unspecified assistance monies. And these are awards to any non-federal agency within Maryland as the principal place of performance. So this includes our money. This includes the grants that we get. And over on the side there, you see some of the summary from this article. Moody's has done 2 reports of interest. One is one they do every year, which is an analysis of the higher ed sector writ large. The other one is a special report they issued in March on the impacts that the federal government actions may have on the state of Maryland and Virginia, but mostly Maryland. And I commend both of those to you. So what are we doing about all this? Next chart, please. Oh, sorry. First, I was asked about a month ago, well, how is this different than the pandemic? You know, what lessons can we learn from the pandemic? What's different from the pandemic? The biggest difference from a financial standpoint is during the pandemic, the federal government poured billions of dollars into the states to offset the negative budgetary impacts of the pandemic. Also a difference, and so of course, we know that the difference there is we're seeing money being pulled out of the public and nonprofit center from the sectors from the federal government. So that's a big difference. Another difference is in the employment impact. In 2020 and 2021, at least in Maryland, while there were severe impacts and tragic impacts to families for people who worked in services, hospitality, other industries that were impacted by the pandemic, for the most part, Maryland continued on because of the makeup of the workforce being a knowledge workforce and certainly higher earners' ability to continue to work remotely. So there wasn't the impact on tax revenues in the pandemic, at least in the state of Maryland, that we are seeing with this financial challenge. And I'll just close by saying federal support is 30% of Maryland's budget, with the majority of that, and this goes to something that Regent McMillan mentioned, the majority of that being Medicaid and other social safety net programs. Okay, now what are we doing about this? So one of the lessons we learned from COVID that we frankly have continued to this day and certainly has informed our communication process is we meet more regularly. The chancellor meets with the presidents weekly now, in addition to our normal monthly meeting. And all of the functional groups are meeting more routinely, more regularly, just as we did at COVID, sharing information, sharing ideas, working together on solutions. So we're doing that. We are monitoring on what feels like an hourly basis, both the state and federal budget landscape. We have asked every university to produce comprehensive financial projections for FY 26, 27, and 28. Within that, we have asked for new updated projections of enrollment and its impact on tuition and other enrollment-driven funding. We've asked for some sense of research funding as another large revenue source. And we have provided guidance on potential scenarios for state appropriations and any potential cuts we may see in the future. Basically, what we've asked folks to do is run a number of scenarios and come forward with their best, highest confidence scenarios of any impacts to revenue, and importantly, any corresponding actions that will be necessary to balance the books. We'll be working with the universities on those plans over the next several weeks and expect by the last meeting of the academic year, so the June meeting at the latest, we'll be able to have a much more comprehensive look. At the system level, we've been running scenarios for what seems like about 2 months. Colleen Allberger, here, the head of budget for the system, and her team have built a brand new model, which we've also offered to any university who wants to use it for their own projections. And I'm pleased that several universities have seen it as a plus to be able to use that. We're also then working with individual universities to help with the modeling. I'm going to pause there. And very tentatively ask if there are any questions.
Yes, Regent McMillan.
So it's very apropos that you have the enrollment projections next to this discussion. If you believe some economists, they liken Maryland to the auto industry in Michigan in the early 2000s. It was devastating to the state. And, you know, the average citizen in Maryland gets about $19,000 in federal outlays across all the residents. And so my question is, what should a system like ours be thinking about if it really is? Because I look at the projections for the enrollment and I'm saying that's somewhat counterintuitive to where the world is going over the next 3 to 4 years. And so I ask you, how do we kind of prepare a little bit more for a worst case if worst case comes? Thanks.
So first on the enrollment, we've identified, even at the system level, about 8 different variables that you could think about in this financial situation, and they don't all run the same way. There are some variables that would suggest you could see, perhaps not uniformly across the board, but you could see enrollment increases in some cases. There are a number of variables that would probably drive you to think you'd see enrollment decreases. This is why we're asking the universities and the presidents and their cabinets to come up with their best case scenarios, because they are the ones that are closest to the situation. They are the ones that are seeing the applications. They are the ones that are seeing deposits come in. Having said that, I'm expecting a volatile enrollment projection season. As the situation progresses, the financial situation progresses, and I haven't talked about any of the other federal policies, federal actions that are going on that are going to impact our economy. But we are, believe me, we are tracking and we are trying to figure out how to project what that might do to people's incomes, the unemployment rates, and so forth. So we're not being Pollyannish about that. And therefore, I expect that we may see many more late decisions in the cycle than we have in the past. And essentially, we're asking our presidents and their folks to just do the best they can, run multiple scenarios. Some of the advice I've given when people have called me is run your best case, worst case, and run a bunch in between. Run confidence intervals, use some statistics to come up with what's likely, but be prepared with a full list of worst case scenario actions, essentially a library of things that you would be ready to do as the situation evolves. And we are doing the same thing at the system level. A couple of pieces of good news, and I know the president's heard me say this Monday. We are very strong financially. Just as we went into the COVID crisis very strong financially, we are very strong today. We have a lot of liquidity. We are in good shape on the balance sheet. So we go into this situation in better shape than, unfortunately, a lot of our colleagues across the country who do not have the benefit of the financial strength we have. And if we need to use that financial strength, obviously, we will propose that to the board.
Ellen, is it safe to say that you spent the better part of the last 2 months really working scenarios with the state, and now you're spending a lot of time focused on what's happening with the feds, and that by the June meeting, you'll have a better analysis of the what ifs, because we're in a period of uncertainty.
That's correct.
And but you will have the modeling done so that you can share it with this board.
I would tweak what you just said just a little. We have been running federal and state scenarios since about January 30th.
Okay.
As soon as the research decisions started to occur, given the size of our portfolio, and frankly, and I give a lot of credit to our financial team across the system, we anticipated the state cuts last May.
Yes.
We started anticipating federal action on November 8th. Now, we didn't start modeling then, but we've been trying to, at least from a modeling standpoint, stay ahead so we can help inform and guide the planning that the universities have to do.
Any other questions from the regions? Yes, Regent Hassan.
The next year budget from the state looks worse than this year, right? I mean, has that been also incorporated in our planning?
So we're asking for a 3-year because, and I had a different chart at the beginning of this presentation before session ended. The different chart was updated with the final actions of the legislature, which Susan's going to cover. The deficit is much smaller at the state level that we're looking at going forward based on the actions of the governor and the legislature right at the end of session. Having said that, we've for about a year now said we need to look at a 3-year cycle because we're going to see uncertainty. Regardless of federal, we felt like we were seeing uncertainty at the state level to the extent that we needed to do 3-year projections. And again, if anybody tells you they know what's going to happen to unemployment and inflation and the growth or lack thereof of the economy, I think we all know that we'll take it all with a grain of salt. Somebody early on said, well, how can I plan since nobody knows what's going to happen? And of course I said, that's when you do planning. That's when you run as many scenarios and you just bear down on it. And that's what we're doing.
Okay, we're going to shift now to thank you, Chancellor, the Vice Chancellor Hurst.
Well, thank you. And thanks for your ongoing support, all of you. Thank you.
And we're going to shift now to Vice Chancellor for Legislative Affairs, Susan Lawrence, who's going to give us the legislative update.
Morning, everyone. It's still morning. Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Regents, Presidents, colleagues, and friends. As everyone knows, we just adjourned Sine Die Monday night at midnight, still unwinding a bit, assessing everything that happened. But let me first start by thanking everyone in this room for always being available to me and my team in Annapolis when we need to call on you, particularly our USMO colleagues, almost daily at times, on proposals and to strategize on positions and amendments. We're so fortunate to have so many subject matter experts in each of our departments. If I start naming names to thank everyone, I might forget someone. So you know who you are, and you'll probably be really glad to get a break from hearing from me so often like you have these past 3 months. I just want to reiterate that those of you who participate in all the weekly calls and strategy sessions, that we couldn't do it without you. We have an amazing committed State Relations Council team representing each one of your universities and our Government Affairs Office, which makes for the best team. But our team members in HR, finance, academic affairs, research, and legal, as well as the teams at your universities, are pivotal to our ability to address the hundreds of legislative proposals that are introduced each year. The issues are vast and sometimes take real interpretation in order to respond effectively and timely, to determine a position, and to submit testimony to explain the impacts on USM. And I also want to thank Sarah Baker, our DLS, Department of Legislative Services analyst, who's available to us every day, all session, and at times, most times, works very closely with us, providing guidance and counsel. So as you've already probably read in many reports this week, since we've adjourned, this was a very difficult session, to say the least. Many have said it was the hardest. I can surely agree that in my 30 years in Annapolis, it truly was one of the hardest, particularly in regard to the state budget. The $67 billion budget passed late on Monday afternoon, which is very late, as many of you may know. The reason it was so late is because there were just weeks of constant negotiating and adjustments based on weekly changes coming down from the federal government and a lower Board of Revenue estimate than expected. But a little more on the budget in a minute. In regard to policy, overall, the legislature introduced about 3,000 pieces of legislation. We identified and tracked over 250 bills that affected USM, and we took action on 50 of those through some form of testimony, oftentimes twice, since many bills are cross-filed, so there's one in each chamber, And with a strong and consistent message to legislators and leadership in our 24 meetings before and during the legislative session, the chair, chancellor, and many of you sitting around this room reiterated at every opportunity we could that the proposed budgetary cut to USM, and in these uncertain economic times, both federal and state, passing legislation that imposed new and additional policies or programs on us would present great challenges and difficulty to our entire system, to say the least. The legislators heard us. I'm pleased to report that no legislation passed that will create an additional fiscal impact on us or create new regulatory or administrative requirements. Now on to budget, but I'll basically just speak to capital. USM fared very well in regard to capital budget projects. USM campuses are slated to receive about $291 million in capital funds for FY26, which is about $36.6 million over FY25. Several projects were also accelerated within the governor's 5-year plan. We appreciate the governor's support in addition to the entire Maryland General Assembly for the support of these projects. And Ellen Shop, as you may know, Mark Beck, it keeps an amazing capital scorecard and tracks all of the projects if you want to see the full picture, which you will see in our end of USM legislative report coming out in a couple weeks. And so far as operating, I mean, I think you got a lot of the landscape from Ellen. We went in with a proposed 5% budget cut at 111. In the last couple of weeks, we were informed there would needed to be another 2% cut at 44 million. And so that leaves us with the full 7% cut. I will just end on that. Overall, in regards to projection, the December projected budget before we were going into session was about 2.6 billion structural deficit, which grew to 3 billion in January once session started. The budget outlook was changing rapidly as session progressed. Loss of revenue from federal government, 29,000 federal jobs at risk, estimated another 300 million in addition to the shortfall. Grant cancellations and less revenue than expected from the Board of Revenue Estimates, which warned that without action, programs like Medicaid could face cuts, pushed us to the 3 billion mark. Maryland's economic outlook remained highly uncertain. The legislature had to be responsive to erasing the 3 billion structural deficit in real time. So overall, they cut 2 billion in proposed spending. General fund spending reduced by 1.5%. They implemented a 1.6 billion revenue enhancement package. They preserved the rainy day fund at $2 billion level. And overall, the final budget leaves us with a 300 million cash balance and a 7 million to the good structural surplus at the end of this fiscal year. But most importantly, this plan improves our structural budget outlook for future years 27 through 30, which, as you had seen the numbers before, have basically been cut in half. You might remember that FY30, they were saying we would be up to 6 billion, and that is at 3 billion now. So in the final hours of session, the Senate and House leadership set up a joint federal action oversight committee to monitor federal actions and to allow state leadership to respond quickly when the legislature is not in session. There's a lot rumors going around. No one has made any decisions. A lot of people are being prepared to possibly return for special session in the fall and possibly October, but we will keep you posted.
Questions for Susan? Bill?
Hi, Susan. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, and you may have mentioned this and I missed it. Did the state access the rainy day fund to deal with this year's budget?
There was a small amount accessed that was in the original proposal from the governor.
So why isn't it more?
I'm sorry, why?
Why wouldn't the state go into the rainy day fund and use more of that money as opposed to cuts?
They looked at other options and made their choices and determined to go a different path and reserve that for the rest of the year, what's coming, which is so much unknown.
Bond rating.
Yeah,
Bond rating.
yeah. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Susan? Seeing none, thank you. And thank
you.
you for all you do. You thanked all of us, but
problem.
you worked tirelessly for the past 3 months.
No problem.
During a time of great uncertainty, Dickens wrote, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." It is the best of times because of all of you. Your dedication to our students, our institutions, and our system is what makes progress possible. Thank you. And yes, it is also the worst of times because of the many uncertainties we face. But we've been here before. Together, we successfully navigated the COVID pandemic. It was an unplanned dress rehearsal for resilience, and we passed. I have every confidence that if we remain grounded in our values and focused on what truly matters, delivering a quality, affordable, and accessible education for all of our students, we will once again rise to this occasion. Your work matters. Our mission matters, and together we'll lead through this uncertainty. This closes our meeting today, and the Open Meetings Act permits public bodies to close their meetings to the public in circumstances outlined in 3-305 of the Act, and to carry out administrative functions exempted by 3-103 of the Act. The Board of Regents will now vote to reconvene in closed session. The agenda for the public meeting today includes a written statement with the citation of legal authority and reasons for closing the meeting, and a listing of the topics to be discussed. The statement has been provided to the Regents and it's posted on the USM website. Do I have a motion to close? Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. The meeting is closed. Denise, where are we doing? Next door. Okay. The closed meeting is next door, and let's take 10 minutes to reassemble.